across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. That is where you will find us. Good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Duncan Barks. Lots to get through. Nigel Farage has claimed, and you will have, if you haven't heard this is fascinating, has claimed Keir Starmer personally told him that Anne Widdecombe's killing was simply a burglary that had gone wrong. Now, this was a couple of days ago before we had new information. Nonetheless, Farage insisting the details don't add up as questions grow over whether the true nature of her death is being played down. Now, we've had different opinions from counter-terrorism police since then, but nonetheless, what a turn of events. Also this afternoon, Keir Starmer faced Kemi Badenoch for the very last time at PMQs today before handing over to Andy Burnham on Monday after a premiership of little more than 2 years, marred by local election disasters and a string of scandals and U-turns. He said, "This is the end of my political journey." I can hardly contain myself. And Argentine fans set fire to Union flags on the streets of Buenos Aires in wild celebrations when they reached the semi-finals. Now, of course, England must prepare for a tie steeped in, well, more than football. This is history. This is serious. The two, of course, meet tonight in what promises to be one of the games of the tournament for lots of different reasons. It is interesting playing a country like Argentina, of course, for all the reasons that we'll establish throughout the course of the show. But you know when there's a visceral feeling that we're going to do all right here? Argentina are not a better team than us. They're certainly not a better country than us. It is an empire of buffoonery, frankly, over there in Buenos Aires. Have you seen some of their governments? I mean, this is coming from us with some of our governments. So let's not worry too much about the politics. Let's get on with the football and win a game and take us to Sunday. We'll look at all of that in more detail in just a little bit. I want to come to this story because we have naturally, understandably and unapologetically majored on this for the last few days. And we'll start with this clip from Zia Youssef, the Home Affairs spokesman for Reform UK. Had a press conference this morning around 10:30 on this very point about security for MPs.
As Home Secretary, I will ensure that all members of Parliament, of all parties, are provided with round-the-clock protection. No matter how much I, Nigel, Richard or anyone else may disagree with your views, if you are an MP, you must be able to air them without fear. An attack on one politician is an assault on our democracy itself.
Indeed. Well, he is right. And, of course, for years we've said being an MP is becoming a dangerous job. Now that conversation has become impossible to ignore. Reform have been arguing, of course, that its MPs, Reform UK MPs, face a unique level of danger and wants enhanced protection for all of its parliamentary team. Given recent events, it's hard to dismiss those concerns. I thought it was interesting that Zia Youssef talked about round-the-clock protection for MPs. There is no country in the world that does that, not even the United States. There are senators, congressmen and women who go to work on the track. They are not all protected. Armed protection 24/7 for every single MP, all 650 of them, would probably cost more than the flipping welfare budget. But would it be money well spent? And why reform? Why do you sense that? I know there's going to be some obvious answers to this, but let's just walk our way through it. I think it's a really interesting one to talk about. Why would reform feel particularly vulnerable? The party, of course, would argue it's because it sits in the centre of some of Britain's most emotionally charged debates, the obvious stuff: immigration, asylum, national identity and crime. Those issues provoke strong feelings, and some people direct that anger towards the politicians themselves rather than the arguments. Do reform in particular need extra protection? Are they marked out in any way, more so than any other party? Does that mean Reform politicians are objectively at a greater risk than, say, Green MPs or those further to the left. Possibly, but it's difficult, of course, to prove. Politicians across the spectrum receive abuse and threats. Female MPs, ethnic minority MPs in particular, have reported just appalling levels of intimidation. The difference may simply be that reform has become the kind of lightning rod, if you like, in modern politics. To supporters, they're telling uncomfortable truths. To opponents, they're blamed for inflaming divisions, and that creates an intensity that I think it's fair to say few parties experience. Ultimately, this should not be tribal. If democracy means anything, every elected representative, whether they are Reform, Labour, Conservatives, Green or Lib Dem, should be able to meet constituents without fear for their lives. Once violence becomes legitimate political language, democracy itself becomes the victim. I think we all know this, but of course there are those that live among us who have a very different take on how you deal with those who disagree with you. 0344 499 1000. Why do you sense that reform in particular, are more vulnerable? I mean, we know what has happened, to a degree we know what has happened with the just horrific murder of Anne Widdecombe. Do we take that as an example, even though we don't yet know the full details? Of course, we've had it with Conservative and Labour MPs too, who've lost their lives, arguably in the name of their politics. Chloe Dobbs is with us, political commentator. Hello, Chloe Dobbs.
Hi, Ian.
Nice to see you. I mean, are Reform particularly vulnerable compared to other parties?
I think that they are. I think although we do have a case of a Labour MP being murdered, I think if you just look at the dialogue that you see coming from the left, not just from people who are on the absolute extreme fringes, but I feel like there are so many ordinary people on the left who you ask them, for example, what they think about the assassination attempts on Donald Trump and this successful assassination of Charlie Kirk. And they're happy about it. They're sad that Donald Trump wasn't killed. They think it would be an amazing thing if this is person that they just... That's quite actually a mainstream opinion, like a sizable minority of people that believe that. Whereas I just do not hear people on the right saying, oh, I really hope that, someone takes out Keir Starmer. You will have a few, you will see the odd nutter on Twitter who says something like that. But I think it's very rare that I hear something like that. It seems to me that it's weird how the left have adopted the term liberals to describe them, because, I mean, they're not liberal at all. These people think that anything, any kind of speech that they disagree with, any kind of opinion that they disagree with should be banned, and that those who speak opinions that they don't like, in some cases, should be killed. Also, another point to make is the fact that it's always going to be people on either on the parties that are on the furthest ends of the spectrum that are going to be more targeted, right? Nigel Farage is always going to be more of a Marmite figure than a centrist politician, right? Yeah. Your parties are going to alienate more people with their... I'm not going to call them extreme, but further to the right than someone who just sits in the middle and tries to please everybody, right? But I do think that they have to, if Reform get into power, they need to be careful not to seem as though they are favouring their own just because they prefer their own. They have to have a really clear protocol as to on what basis you decide what security to give someone, and I hope that they do that, because it is Reform, at least the impression I get, and people on the right, as I say, who want people that they disagree with to be protected and to stay alive, regardless of what they think of their opinions.
It is extraordinary.
If Zach Polanski, God forbid, ended up Prime Minister and he was in charge of making the decision as to how much security Nigel Farage got, I'm not sure he would take the threat quite so seriously.
Do you know what? But at least you can write him off as a half-wit, as a guy that really has no philosophical in on anything. He's talking about the kind of nonsense of heroin and landlords and confusing messages all around. But I think what's interesting with because this, I think, is about morality, or how people see morality, as much as it is about anything. So one story this week, you'd have seen it, some bloke who said that I hope Anne Widdecombe died a painful death. I think this is somebody who works at a university or something. I would hope that's being investigated. And even when asked to, kind of withdraw it, I think suggested something like he stood by this tweet. And I thought, so this is based on nothing more than somebody who has a different opinion to you. That's literally it. Now, they might be fundamentally at odds with you. I think it was largely a sort of LGBT thing. And that's Anne Widdecombe can have those views. And she would argue that her religion informs those views. There's lots of people of the same religion who don't have those. But look, it's a spectrum, right? I mean, that's her opinion. Since when did we live in North Korea? She had that opinion. Somebody disagrees with it. And as a result, they feel not only is it OK to say, I hope this person died a painful... You know, 78, 79-year-old woman, you hope they died a painful death. I mean, what kind of demented oddball would say that? The person that believes they are not just intellectually correct, factually correct, but morally correct. And that's, I think, the problem, that they believe when they say that about Anne Widdecombe, in their mind, it's what you would say about Hitler, Chairman Mao, Stalin. Well, it's fine because you're punching up.
Well, that's what happens when the press and various people online start to liken people like Nigel Farage and people like Donald Trump to Hitler, OK? You may not like these people, but trust me, they are far, far from the level of evil that Hitler was at. And so if you ask most people, of course, Hitler ended up taking his own life, but you know, would it be the right thing if Hitler hadn't done so to have killed him? Most people would say, yeah, he committed so much evil on such an astronomical scale that it would have been justified. So so this is how they justify it. They say, well, Donald Trump is Hitler, therefore he should be assassinated.
It. So Charlie Kirk found himself in the same conversation point.
Exactly. I mean, it had like "F you fascist" written on the bullets or on the gun. It was discovered. So that is the problem. And when people live in, I mean, there are various different reasons, but when people live in an echo chamber, especially with social media algorithms that just, well, first of all, the most extreme things get the most clicks, and you're always pretty much fed what you agree with. You just end up going further and further down the rabbit hole. And as I said before, this is not just people who are really extreme posting that stuff, like that person that worked at a university that posted that horrible thing about this. Some people might not post it online, but many people privately share this opinion. I was chatting to a friend who I thought was a fairly switched-on, intelligent individual, and then out of nowhere he comes out with, I hope that Nigel Farage gets a really horrible form of cancer that gives him a really slow, painful death. And I was like, wow. OK. But I hear this often with, I have friends that are left-wing who don't, on the face of it, seem like, these woke, deranged nutters, like some of the most extreme examples. But then, it comes out that they're in favour of people they dislike being killed, and I find that maddening that we've got to that point. I think that these people, they can't win against these people in the ballot box or with good argument, and so they think the only way to beat them is with violence.
I said this yesterday on the show. I was talking to a Sevenoaks Lib Dem, and when I mentioned that I knew Richard Tice, and he was a really decent guy and a really nice, honest, diligent man, I mean, the look on her face was as if I'd just killed her dog. I mean, it was just extraordinary. She sort of discombobulated, and her face sort of morphed into this sense. It was sort of beyond whatever the next word beyond incredulity is when it comes to somebody saying something. She was like, well, that's not even possible, surely. She didn't say that, but that was the look. Really? Really? What, somebody can be a nice person because you can't be a nice person because you have a different opinion to them? What sort of world is that? Based on that logic, Richard Tice should think you're a half-wit. I mean, it's ridiculous. He should also think the same thing of you. Yeah. She would say, no, I want the good people. That's the problem.
I feel like there are a lot of these people who they rarely come across people who openly admit that they are fans of someone like Richard Tice or Nigel Farage or Donald Trump, that they even though the election results clearly show that it's the case that many people agree with these politicians, they don't quite believe it's true. I mean, some of them believe the elections are rigged and what. They don't quite believe it's true. And you'll probably have experienced this, where you're having conversations with people and they'll talk as if it is a given that everyone in the table agrees with them. Like, oh, and obviously, Donald Trump is an evil rapist, misogynist. Like, I had that the other day. I was just sat at the Canoe Club having a conversation and someone just comes out with that sort of thing out of nowhere. Most people who say like Donald Trump probably would have kept quiet there, because then they're nervous, right? Because they're like, oh God, this person's really antagonising him. But I said, actually, politely, I disagree with that, and I'll tell you why, right? But he was so shocked. He was like, seriously, you as a young woman don't, how could you possibly like Donald Trump when he's this evil rapist. He was absolutely baffled because I don't think anyone had ever told him before that they liked Donald Trump. He'd never heard that before.
It's so bizarre.
Because
this is somebody who's got
the silent Tory and now say the silent reformer, silent Donald Trump supporter. People are scared.
But he got a thumping majority at the last election, so I mean, it's not as if he kind of just edged in there. I mean, like most of America that voted for him. We're asking that question: are reform politicians, in particular, in danger? 0344 499 1000. I want to bring this story in to go back to the still being investigated horrendous story of Widdecombe. The suspect may have targeted other Reform MPs, it's been suggested, as cops probe left-wing extremism, which is what we're talking about here. But this is interesting. Nigel Farage revealed some information on Talk with Jeremy Kyle this morning about what he'd been told as regards to Anne Widdecombe's killing. Let's have a listen to this.
I spoke to the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police 3 times. I spoke to the Prime Minister as well. And those calls took place over Friday and Saturday, and they both told me it's a burglary that's gone wrong.
Now, that's interesting, a burglary that's gone wrong. Now, whether they said it in those terms or whether Keir Starmer... I mean, you'd think as a lawyer and that Keir Starmer would... He might have said it could have been a burglary that gone wrong, but that's what Farage is saying. That's what he was told by, I think he said the Chief Constable, didn't he, Finn, in that clip, as well as the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's, spinning that out of proportion, and we've seen that as well on the, you've mentioned the fact that they're looking into the possibility that this individual may have targeted other Reform MPs, and same with the counter-terror police chief was asked at his press conference yesterday. Is it possible that this could have been foreign state interference? And he just says, we're keeping all options on the table. And immediately the headlines are, counter-terror police considering that it may have been a foreign state interference, as if they have evidence to suggest that that is the case. So I don't know if it's a little bit of that going on, but we don't know exactly how the crime scene exactly was dealt with. But one point that Peter Blexley made, he absolutely laid into talking to Kevin on this channel, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Devon and Cornwall, for her praise of the Devon and Cornwall police and how they dealt with his. And the point that Peter Blexley made out is the rule is, and it should be with the old manuals that many of the woke police forces have now chucked out, that you consider it murder until proven otherwise, right? So that you don't go in and, trample all over the crime scene. I think my understanding is paramedics were called before the police. So did the paramedics come in and just walk all over the place, potentially destroy crucial evidence, fingerprints and whatnot? If it is the case that the police thought that this was a burglary and were insisting on that for some period of time, they may well have destroyed crucial evidence at that scene.
But that's never been said, has it? I mean, Nigel Farage is saying that he was told that by a Chief Constable and the Prime Minister, but that's never been said out loud by any of these people. Yeah,
well, I mean, the police are very, they're very careful about following exactly all the rules publicly as to exactly what they've said. They're probably rather annoyed that Nigel Farage has come out and, given details.
But I don't know at what point he would have had those conversations, because at that point, I mean, it was quite soon that we realised somebody it appeared, and this is a suspect, by the way, we should keep that in mind, and it's still a live investigation and no one has been charged. However, somebody has been arrested and they're held on a couple of different counts. But by that stage, we're looking at this thinking somebody travelled, what was it, 300 miles or something, to carry out a burglary in a completely distant part of the land from where they live. I mean, I think nobody thought that at all, at any point.
Well,
really.
I mean, by the time...
So the idea that a cop would come out with that is bizarre.
I think he's talking about in the initial stages of this, right? Because, well, first, by the time this 28-year-old in Rotherham had been arrested, they were absolutely considering it murder. Remember, before that, when they were also considering it murder, they arrested a guy in Newton Abbot, who they then later released. There was also a lot of confusion about the timing of it, because when she was found on Thursday morning, there was this presumption that something probably happened during the night on Thursday night. It wasn't till about 24 hours after we heard publicly that Anne Widdecombe was dead, that the Channel 5 producer then came out saying, here, look at these text messages. It was around 12:30 on Wednesday, about 24 hours earlier, that Anne Widdecombe stopped replying to me. And that that really changed the game as well. So they obviously did fairly quickly move on to considering it murder, but they should have considered it murder from the get-go. And I don't know if that's what they did in how they dealt with the scene.
Yeah. We'll talk some more to Chloe Dobbs in just a second. Over to you as well, 0344 499 1000. Anything you've just heard in that conversation you want to chip in on, that's fine. Are reform politicians specifically, particularly in danger when it comes to the safety of our political representatives? Lines are open. This is Talk.
Comments from a fool, really. I mean, you don't have to be intelligent to be a politician, but it does help. You know, if he's going to talk about it, he needs to, if he's going to make historical references, he needs to read history correctly. Argentina weren't even a country as when we occupied the islands. They were called the Nation of States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
0344 499 1000. Let's look at this story then. 5 days until Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister, and Sir Keir Starmer has been kind, has been sort of counting the... Shall I just wait till Finn's written that? It's bad. I was literally reading that out as Finn, our producer, was typing it. It was a beautiful kind of little double act we had going on there. But it's 5 days until Burnham takes the job, and of course Keir Starmer has been counting down the occasion himself.
Could you please join me when I say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1... Yay! It worked. Nervous moment there, but it's all good.
Oh dear.
I'd forgotten about that. Starmer's made Starmer made so many blunders that I've forgotten all of these old relics like this.
I mean, that's where you want the Prime...
all of the cringy feelings re-emerged watching it again.
Like you just want the Prime Minister... You want a Prime Minister that's going to go, look at that beauty, who's got a tree like that at home. That's what you want somebody to say, something just normal. Oh, look, it works, everybody. Oh, it would like some kind of CBBC presenter. Look, kids, it works. On it goes.
It's so painful.
Gripping stuff, just like his successor.
Good growth in every postcode, hope in every heart. That's our mission.
Oh, God. Good growth in every postcode, hope in every heart.
Sounds wonderful, doesn't it?
This is Burnham
but how is he going to make that happen?
In his sort of TikTok skin, where he's doing these little videos going, yeah, I just went in there and voted for myself. Bit weird, that, isn't it? You know, he did all of that stuff, and it was all a bit cringy. I don't think he'll be doing quite as much of that as Prime. I hope he's not.
Well, I mean, that's all the in thing now, but... Keir Starmer tried to get all over TikTok. Remember, he hired himself a social media manager, and he's been putting out all of these social media clips, and he tries to do stuff where it looks like he's down with the kids and he's meeting kids at school. And remember, he did the whole like 6-7 thing in school with the... Just like the Christmas tree, it all just comes across incredibly awkward and robotic. At least with Andy Burnham, I do not agree with his politics. I think it's going to be a mess. But at least when he does some TikToks, you'll at least feel like you're listening to a human being.
There is that. He's
where
it's
not completely forced. It seems natural, and that's one reason why he did well in Makerfield. The polling for a Labour candidate that isn't Andy Burnham versus a Labour candidate that is Andy Burnham, there was like such a stark difference. It's just because he comes across very human and likeable. But what's happening is that the more that he opens his mouth and announces what his plans are, he's putting people off. And he's clearly avoided telling people what his plans are because no one really knows what he stands for and what his plan. We've had a few little ideas bubbling around, but no one's really got an idea. And of course, we're about to have summer recess in Parliament. The Tories tried to make it so that on an opposition day they could have a grilling of Andy Burnham before summer recess, but Labour managed to move things around to make sure that doesn't happen, and they can talk about do a menial debate on Iran instead. And that means that Andy Burnham then will probably have the whole summer to just not really tell us what on earth is going on other than these little slogans like, what was it, growth in every postcode, hope in every heart?
Hope in every heart.
What does that mean?
But what's the idea of playing to they're all kind of like, you've got to get cool with the kids. Right, no you haven't. Ignore the kids. The kids don't matter, frankly. If you're under about 30, sod off. You've got no say in anything. You're contributing nothing to the economy anywhere. Doesn't matter. Don't play to that audience. I love you to bits, Chloe, but frankly, you're under 30, so therefore, you shouldn't even be voting, frankly, right now.
Oh, dear.
I'm jesting. But the idea that you would go for the TikTok lot, you know, and go, hey, yeah, let's try and get the kids in on the TikTok. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to politicians. Any politician is going to look like a bit of a dodge pot when they do that. They're always going to look bad.
No, I would disagree with that on two examples. So first of all, the last general election, one reason why Reform were able to get a load of votes with a tiny team. Yes, they were very spread out and they didn't get many seats, but they got a lot of votes, mostly because of the social media reach, because of Nigel's TikToks and whatnot. And he comes across...
What adult is on TikTok?
Loads of adults are on TikTok.
What's wrong with them?
Loads of
Should be in
adults
jail if you're on TikTok. It's for little children, Chloe.
No, but they don't just get posted on TikTok.
No,
right?
I know
they get posted on Facebook.
I see them.
If you look at my average audience on Facebook is over 65. That's like the biggest.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's full of oldies who will.
Don't look at me like that when you say over 65, as if like one of your lot. I know I'm nearer that cohort than you are, but I take the point.
And also, when Theresa May called the snap general election in 2017, she thought she was going to get a bigger majority, right? Well, get a majority. Then what happened was Corbyn and his lot actually did really well because they actually harnessed the power of social media. They had a great social media campaign, whereas the Tories were just being old school, just doing knocking on doors and leafleting. But it actually did work. Yes, Jeremy Corbyn did not become Prime Minister, but he came quite close to it.
He did come quite close to it. I think that that time will show that actually the amount of emphasis we put on the success of social media was intrinsically quite minimal. It provided a lot of interest. It galvanised the headlines. It meant that you see it on the socials. We then talk about it. Other people then talk about it, and you kind of run away with the impression that that was where the kind of election campaign was won. But who knows? Anyway, let's very briefly, Chloe, because we've got to do this, because it's a moment. Really, we should have a moment's silence, really, because today marked Keir Starmer's last. Can I do this without crying? Because I'm very emotional about this. His last Prime Minister's questions before. I can't do it. Beforehand, and I can't even say that swine's name, before Burnham takes over on Monday. Just over 2 years in office, ending his resignation after a string of local election disasters and a few scandals in there as well. Here's a little snippet.
To all those in the gallery whose lives have been changed or improved by this Labour government, and all across the country who struggle to be seen or heard, you're the reason I came into politics.
Now, it's interesting. If you know the layout of Parliament, he's looking at the gallery opposite where he's sitting. You know what I'm talking about here, Chloe. That's not the public gallery for a start. So that's like the invited gallery. So the public gallery is to his right. So he wasn't talking to that group. The ones in the middle there are usually invited people. They're sort of guests of MPs, and sometimes the odd MP sits in there. Nonetheless, to all of those people whose lives are better now than when we came into office, does such a person exist in this country that would go, do you know what, 2 years ago it was rubbish, now everything's tickety-boo? Does that situation exist anywhere?
The people who have got 10 kids, yeah. They've had the 2-child benefit cap lifted. The people who've got anxiety and ADHD PhD and have benefited from Rachel Reeves failing to cut down the welfare bill. Maybe they've benefited.
I mean, usually when an MP
some
says...
people have, but it's not the right people.
But, you know, when a politician says, you know, I leave government, we leave the country in a better state than we started, that's usually somebody who's been there for 10 years, like, you know, Thatcher or Blair or somebody. And I kind of get you've got the right to make that claim, even though people will disagree with you. You've got the right to make that claim after a decade, not after 18 months.
No, exactly. I mean, it's quite hilarious how quickly the ship has sunk after only you know, having 14 years on the opposition benches to prepare for this moment of a Labour government, and they couldn't have failed any more miserably.
Well, when we meet again, Chloe, we will have a new Prime Minister.
Amazing. It might be slightly more interesting to see PMQs there.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit lively.
We'll have to wait until after summer.
Thank you to Chloe Dobbs with us here on Talk. Over to you as well. Lots to talk about. Are reform politicians in particular in danger? Your thoughts on that and the kind of the hatred, if you like, of the right. And I'm genuinely fascinated by that whole area of discussion. Thoughts on that? Lines are open. It's 1:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 25 to 2. I think he said to 5 for some bizarre reason. Richard in West Yorkshire says reform are more susceptible to attack and need more protection simply as a result of pure jealousy by so many. Is it any party that sits further to either, in the case of reform, further to the right, or I guess it would be the Greens? I mean, of course, there are right-wing nutjobs that will seek out somebody that they fundamentally disagree with, and we saw this with Joe Cox. But on balance, where does that real anger against your political oppositions lie? Are reform in particular danger, as distinct from other groups of MPs? 597 death threats, Nigel Farage has said he's had since February. A targeted attack, of course, that killed Anne Widdecombe. Though, to be fair, we await the finer details of that. Counter-terror police, though, investigating whether other reform politicians are also targets. Are certain political parties under attack more than others? Let's firstly speak to Lord Daniel Finkelstein, Times columnist and Tory peer. Daniel, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us. I mean, your thoughts on this, really? I mean, there's always people who have the hump with somebody who's got a different view to them politically, and most of us just go, well, he thinks different to me, let's have a pint and discuss it, and that's all fine and dandy. That happens, of course, as you well know, in the parliamentary estate, where Strangers Bar and other areas are full of the most curious combos of people enjoying a tete-a-tete and a swift ale. However, there are, of course, others that can't stomach that, and a political opponent is not an opponent, they're an enemy. And there's a sense that has grown in recent years. Your thoughts?
Well, of course, it's true that the more prominent you are, the more likely you are to come under attack from people, as well as the more likely you are to attract praise from people. It's part of, they're both different sides of the same coin. I'm really, really worried about the violence towards members of parliament and to prominent politicians. And I think lots of the things that Reform have said about it have been correct, particularly Richard Tyers concentrating on what's happening outside parliament. But what absolutely isn't true, I mean, it's plainly factually incorrect, is the idea that this is mainly left-wing on right-wing violence rather than right-wing on left-wing violence, and this is more about Reform than other parties, given that one of the people that was killed was a Conservative MP, another was a Labour MP, and now we've had, presuming that this does turn out to be, as it looks like it possibly is, political violence against Anne Widdecombe. So any one political party trying to say it's just about them, I think just underestimates the issue. The issue is that people, and by the way, it isn't even about polarising politics. So I've got what I regard personally, and I'm sure Nigel Farage regards his own politics in the same way as moderate politics, but it still attracts lots of people who don't like my view on Israel, for example, or my view on free markets, and they make themselves known, and sometimes that rhetoric as being quite violent, and I've had to involve the police. So it's just not true that this is about Reform alone, but it is about Reform and it's as well, and they're perfectly entitled to be alarmed by somebody in their own party suffering in this way. And Anne Widdecombe was someone that I knew pretty well. I worked with her for several years. And it's very distressing when someone suffers any kind of violence, particularly at her age and in the way that she did and being killed.
597 death threats against Nigel Farage, though, Daniel. I mean, taking into account what you've just said, and I get it, there's nothing, Reform don't have the monopoly on this in that sense, but that does seem rather steep. And I know that when we speak to counter-terrorist police, they say, look, what somebody says on social media is rarely followed up, but nonetheless, that would seem hugely disproportionate for one.
It's a very, very large number of people. But my mum and my dad had very different wartime experiences, and my mum was a victim of Hitler and my father of Stalin, and my mother's had this phrase, which is, it's not a competition, right? I'm really not, it's a good point, yes. It's really not
Stalin or Hitler, what a competition, yeah.
Exactly. It's really not acceptable that anybody receives any death threats. I have no way of knowing how many death threats the Prime Minister receives. That's a lot of death threats, and therefore Nigel Farage, as I've been arguing for quite a while, and I noticed this, by the way, when I worked for William Hague. I think things are a bit better than they were, but I was always very alarmed by the lack of security around him when I worked for him. And anybody who, I'm a member of the House of Lords, as you pointed out, anybody who goes into the Lords now knows that it's possible that you will come under kind of a barrage of abuse or other things as you're entering in down the streets into the chamber. I do worry about that too. I don't think it's necessary for me to adjudicate on this. It's a bit irritating to have the suggestion that it's just about Reform, because it kind of minimises the violence against other people, and it also suggests that violent behaviour is merely a factor of left-wing extremism. It's also a factor of right-wing extremism. It's both of them are involved in it. I've always been very opposed and very struck by both of them, and this is not about that. It's about making sure that people who have controversial views, which Nigel Farage does, and which in a lesser way, because I'm much less well known, I do, we receive the protection we need for the various different levels of danger we face. And clearly because he's a very prominent politician, because he's a very serious contender for power, he has a lot of death threats. That's very concerning.
Indeed. I mean, I get it. Look, you know, people have their own views on politicians, but there does seem to be a sort of tangible shift in the sort of emphasis of the way people impart their disagreement, even if it's ferocious. It wasn't that long ago where, you know, if you saw a politician you didn't like, somebody lobbed an egg at them. You know, we all remember the John Prescott moment. Now, of course, it's, you know, somebody wishing you had cancer or your house burnt down and or you were shot in the head. Now, I know social media sort of allows a conduit to that, which was never there before, and maybe it is only that. Perhaps people had those thoughts and never did anything. But there does seem to be a shift in the anger against people who don't like a certain politician because of their views.
That's true. Look, eggs and milkshakes and other things like that are pretty frightening, actually, and they're quite an assault on someone. And I've never wanted to minimise those things. Those people who laughed when Nigel Farage had a milkshake thrown at him, well, I think it was rightly quite a serious criminal offence. It must have been very shocking for him, and I just think those things are not. You know, people do them in ways where they think flour or an egg or a milkshake is somehow witty, and it's not witty. It's very frightening. It's very invasive. So I'm very strongly opposed to those things. But it's true that we're now getting this new category of kind of lone wolf or even organised violence, and that's very worrying. And I definitely think people are gaining courage from other people to express themselves in deeply unpleasant ways. People have always harboured these feelings, and actually in a different era. So if you read about William Pitt the Younger, for example, or Wellington, you'll hear stories of, you know, Wellington's windows being broken, Pitt being chased from one Pall Mall club to another, having to seek refuge. When Spencer Perceval was attacked, when he was killed, the carriage of his assassin, that the crowd tried to overturn it in order to free him in Parliament Square on the day that he committed this, because there was quite a lot in that Georgian period of murderous intent. But all that having been said, that doesn't mean that we're not in a new period after maybe a period where there was less violence, where this violence has become normalised, and we've got to do something about it.
Indeed. Daniel, great to have you on. Lovely to speak. Thank you, sir. Lord Daniel Finkelstein, Times columnist and Tory peer. That's kind of interesting, the historic context that he just gave at the end there, that there is, you know, there has been horrendous violence before. Let's speak with Layla Cunningham, Reform UK's mayoral candidate for the London 2028 election. Layla, good afternoon to you. Look, we know that this can happen to all sorts of politicians. From different parties, the two obvious very high-profile cases, David Amess and Joe Cox. So it's not exclusive to one party where an opponent or somebody thinks differently to you, or they don't like the politics of your party or the system, will act in a lethal way. But the argument seems to be from certainly Nigel Farage and maybe others, although Zia Youssef was quite open about the fact that all MPs should get some form of protection. Do you think reform politicians are particularly in danger?
Listen, I think politics in general has become far more hostile, and I don't think that's really healthy in a democracy. I've had to take extra security precautions, and, you know, I don't say that for sympathy. I say it because it shouldn't be normal for politicians to feel that they need them. And I think democracy really does, like Zia said in the morning, it depends on people being willing to stand for election. And if people are too frightened to put themselves forward, then that is a problem. And listen, of course, you have to have robust criticism and scrutiny. Of course, that's part of politics, and it's what people expect. But there's a difference. You know, there's a difference, as Zia said today, that there's a difference when you say Nigel was involved with the Hitler Youth, or when you call us, you know, fascists, an existential threat to democracy. I think these things are so extreme. We all know what the Nazis did. We all know what fascist means. And to compare our politics to that can, in someone who's not mentally, you know, stable, perhaps, put a target on our back. But I'm not going to lie. I think all politicians feel intimidated. I think sometimes the rhetoric I get I get messages on social media saying, you know, I think I got it after Anne Widdecombe sadly was killed, I said, I think it's time you killed yourself now as well.
Wow. I remember you telling me last time, a few weeks ago now, I can't even remember what the story was. There were so many stories out there, Layla. And you were telling me, and I'm not betraying anything, I think it was off air, but it's in context with what you're saying now, about the kind of messages you got off the back of XYZ story. And it was outrageous. And this was just a standard day.
Yeah, I honestly don't know if that's normal or not. I kind of think that all politicians probably
I think women get it worse than men, interestingly.
Yeah, because there's always a sexual violence element to it. In my instance, anyway, of course, it's not just reform. As we all know, Jo Cox was horrifically murdered. So was David Amess. But I think we feel it perhaps more acutely now because Anne Widdecombe was one of ours. She shared our political view, our political outlook. She was a spokesperson for reform. The police have said that perhaps it was politically motivated. We don't know if it was, but I don't know. So. In waiting for that conclusion, you are very anxious, yes.
Zia, you've talked about kind of blanket protection, really, for MPs. I don't know whether that would be... I can see the aspiration for that. I don't think there's any country in the world that has managed to achieve that for its parliament, even in America, where, people love a gun over there in the States. Not every senator, not every congressman or woman has any form of protection. So to do that on one would assume that would involve more than one person per MP, would be I mean, maybe it's the way we have to go. I don't know. Is that... some would also say, well, that's kind of caving in. It's like, when there's a terror attack, we try not to change too many of our ways because that sort of bends to the desires and the intent of the terrorist. And would it be a bit like that if we ended up having armed protection for every single MP in Westminster?
I mean, perhaps, but sometimes you have to do what's necessary. We don't think that you protect democracy just by protecting elections. You also have to protect the people willing to stand in them. Otherwise, it's a farce. If you have people standing for election and standing for beliefs that are mainstream and they are too scared to voice their beliefs, then do we really have a democratic society? I think democracy does rely on the freedom to express views and represent different, obviously. How many people are there in this country? They all have different views and they expect elected politicians to represent those views. And if some are painted as beyond the pale or they're too scared to voice their opinion, then those people don't get representation. And that's not really a democratic society. So I think it's less about looking at whether we're caving in, and it's more at looking at protecting the sanctity of democracy at all cost.
Yeah, that would sound completely reasonable. And it is difficult now, though.
It's a sad state of affairs,
Well, yes, your job was never meant to be about looking over your shoulder, was it? I mean, that's the reality.
No, 100% not. But and I'm sure I speak on behalf of other politicians, it doesn't make you want to retire and not do anything. Obviously, my family's worried, but it makes you want to fight harder and persevere.
Persevere indeed. Listen, Layla, always lovely to have you on. Thank you for your time. Layla Cunningham is Reform UK's mayoral candidate for the London 2028 election. Thank you to her. Comments coming in from you. Jeff says, can you call it what it is, mate? Far left extremism. Don't leave out the word far. Yeah, because they love to put the word far in right. I think that's the point Jeff is making. And it would be far left or right, depending on the case. I wonder whether some of these cases are not even really about left or right, just about people who are bonkers and mad. And I'm not saying that as a cheap, mischievous, I mean, genuinely. I mean, by definition, if you're willing to do that, there's got to be something wrong with you, right? David Amess, Jo Cox. We await to find out the specific details, but we think we're in the ballpark of perhaps what happened to poor Anne Widdecombe. Thoughts on this? 0344 499 1000. Kaz says, sod off. There you go. She says a bit more than that. She says, I'm on TikTok and I'm of a certain age. Lol. Yes, and I think we should do everything we can to get Kaz banned from TikTok, frankly. Look, it can be. I think most people who are on TikTok are on it to watch other people on TikTok rather than do their own TikTok thing. I know what the addiction is like. Even YouTube, you know, has those. I said it yesterday. I love watching American school mums, that's not the end of the sentence, American school mums driving home from school half cut, being stopped by the police, who can't seem to understand the basic instruction of, can you get out the car, please? And then this refusal and this melee happens, and you find yourself watching about 100 of these things. They're all the same, by the way. They're always the same. It's like, but they're so good. They're so good, and the cop's so calm, and the woman's so irrational. But social media does that to your head, right? The reason we mentioned social media was because that has become, you know, almost the platform now where everything happens, the electioneering, the getting popular bit. But to chime in with the subject we're talking about, the threats of violence and death as well. Thoughts on this, and in particular, are reform politicians in danger? This is Talk.
Comments from a fool, really. I mean, you don't have to be intelligent to be a politician, but it does help. You know, if he's going to talk about it, he needs to, if he's going to make historical references, he needs to read history correctly. Argentina weren't even a country as when we occupied the islands. They were called the Nation of States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And this in from No Name Given. The hypocrite Starmer says we must do more to defend democracy. Why did he try to cancel local elections? Yeah, not just him, some of the Tories as well, because they were the last lot. There was a kind of choice. You didn't have to cancel some of them, and some did. Some breaking news here. Asylum seekers Ibrahim Al-Sheikh, 26, Abdullah Ahmadi, 26, have been jailed at Hove Crown Court for 21 years each for raping a woman on Brighton Beach. This is on October the 4th last year. You may remember this was a particularly brutal, as if there's any other kind, but this was incredibly brutal for many, many reasons. Simultaneously, Karine Al-Danasut, 21, who filmed the attack, has been sentenced to 18 years and 6 months in prison. So, lengthy sentences for those three. Were they long enough? I'm sure that discussion will continue. Amanda says politicians today, I think, are certainly more violent than in the past, or politics. It is completely down to the fact that for some time now our kids have been brainwashed to think in a certain way and to no longer have respectful debate. It could be that. It's very hard. I know we wang on about social media quite a bit, but it is relevant to this, isn't it? If you took away all social media, if it'd never been invented, would we be having a very different kind of discussion now? There will still be nutters out there who think it's OK to kill a high-profile person, a public person who happens to be on TV or something, or but maybe in particular a politician because of their views. That wouldn't necessarily go away if there was no social media. But social media has certainly accelerated and added booster rockets to the kind of arena, the amphitheatre of anger. Charlie is in Reigate. What have you got, Charlie? Good afternoon.
How you doing, Ian?
I'm all right, thanks. Good as gold.
Yeah, so really phoning up about the assassination of Anne Widdecombe, really. So when you have a situation where Nigel Farage had a milkshake thrown over him twice, but the second time, the young lady that done it, she walked out of court, all the cameras were there, and she had a smirk on her face.
Yeah.
She was allowed to walk out of court. She was allowed to walk out of court. OK? Now, if that would have been Sadiq Khan, she'd have got 6 months. She'd have got 6 months straight, and you know it and I know it.
Well, you think she would have got a different sentence for that?
She would have got a different sentence because of the narrative that is pushed nowadays. Come on, Ian. Sadiq Khan's got. Everybody knows that he's got armed guard. What's he need an armed guard for?
Well, he's got armed guard because he's been. Look, when they assess who is the threats against somebody, whether they're real or whether they're imagined. I mean, he's got a lot of angst from elements of the Muslim community, not just people from other faiths or other political persuasions.
OK, I can't stand the man, but I wouldn't hurt him. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I don't think I'd even be disrespectful to him if I met him on the street. I wouldn't.
You'd want to have a debate with him or a chat, and
I won't tell you what I want to do, but it's what I would do. OK, what I wouldn't do is be disrespectful, and I wouldn't hurt anybody, especially if they was a politician. So you have people like. Let's go back to the milkshake thing where Joe Brand, the
battery acid.
Oh, I mean, she is. Again, if I'd have said that, or you would have said that.
Is there a difference, though, when she said it in a sort of satirical setting? I think she was on a Radio 4 show. I spoke to Nigel after that the first milkshake attack, and I said to him, at the moment that person came towards you, did you think this could be something else? And he said yes.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
the first thought was...
Because he's being attacked.
He's being attacked. Absolutely spot on. Charlie, I've got to move, but thank you for starting things off and initiating a big element of this discussion. Do our views change? Does society's views change depending on who it was that was attacked? 0344 499 1000. That is where you will find us. So many comments to come in on this. We're asking the question, are reform politicians more likely to be in danger than politicians of other parties? Lines are open on that. You can message 87222. Back with you in a sec. First, let's get the news at 2 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yeah, 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. So 597 death threats against Nigel Farage since February. A targeted attack that has killed Anne Widdecombe, and now counter-terror police are investigating whether other Reform politicians were also targets. Are certain political parties more under attack than others? And we are just hearing, by the way, that the police have arrested a man for threatening to kill Nigel Farage. This is from the Telegraph. That we don't have much detail other than that. The suspect, who described himself as a terrorist on social media, warned Mr. Farage, "I'm going to shoot you in the head if you win." Details to come. Keir Starmer faced Kemi Badenoch for the very last time at PMQs. Oh, it was an amicable love-in, wasn't it? After handing over power, of course, to Andy Burnham on Monday, after a premiership of little more than 2 years, marred by local election disasters and a string of scandals and U-turns. Thoughts on that as well. And Argentine fans set fire to a Union flag on the streets of Buenos Aires. This is in wild celebrations. This is in anticipation, of course, of that match tonight after they reach the semi-final. Now, of course, England must prepare for a tie steeped in history when the two sides meet later in what promises to be one of the biggest games of the tournament. This is about so much more, apparently, than football. Details to come. Lots to get through. 0344 499 1000. Michael says, for years, very experienced retired street cops and commentators like Peter Blexley have warned about the effects of Mrs May's woke, academic, inexperienced, fast-track police chiefs who've never confronted a criminal. Nobody listened. Now we see the results. We reap what you sow, and it's too late to rectify it, says Michael, which is kind of feeding into police responses and the like. Michael, thank you very much indeed for that. So, at his final Prime Minister's question time, Keir Starmer insisted that he's leaving Britain in a better place than he found it, citing a stabilised economy and a stronger global reputation. This is from the Prime Minister, of course, who was forced out by his own cabinet after a little more than 2 years. There were a lot of U-turns, there were a lot of scandals, there were a lot of staff that he fired and got rid of along the way. Let's speak with James Mathewson, former Labour Party spokesman and political commentator. I was expecting you, James, to have a little I Love Keir hat on, just to celebrate, you know, the final day almost. But I know that you were not the biggest fan of Keir Starmer. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Yeah, I think I betrayed my feelings about Keir Starmer probably too much, to be honest. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, the guy has done what he could with the job that he was given. I don't think he ever should have been in the job. I think the job was the wrong job for him. I think he was convinced he wanted it by somebody else, namely Mr. McSweeney. And I think he was the figurehead for a political movement to try and get, you know, back to the old Labour Party that Morgan McSweeney once knew and loved.
Yes, I mean, maybe. So you think there was maybe a sort of Fabian-esque plan behind getting Keir in, that they could kind of mould him into, you know, something else once he was there?
I wish I could say there was as much thought put into it, Ian, as that, as all good conspiracies should be well thought out. But no, I think it was just that Keir Starmer seemed to be somebody that McSweeney could put in front of cameras and lead forward. After McSweeney was gone, he was just rudderless, he was directionless. I would say they were anyway. I don't think they ever thought about what came after an election victory. You know? It's
kind of weird, isn't it? Because, you know, I've said this to you before. You know, you would be more Team Corbyn than Team Starmer, and
Not quite. I mean, I did. You know, after I left working under Jeremy's kind of team in the Labour Party, I ended up saying, you know, that I thought there was a huge amount of mistakes and errors made, and I don't think Jeremy Corbyn should have been Prime Minister either. I don't think he was right for the job.
But what I did like, and this is the bit that I have mentioned to you before, I did like the fact. I mean, I loved that election when it was him versus Theresa May. I mean, as it turns out, history won't show Theresa May as being quite the sort of ferocious right winger that she was portrayed as being, but nonetheless, you know, she had that school mistressy thing going on. She was archetypal, sort of vicar's daughter, village hall conservative, and Jeremy Corbyn, this kind of firebrand lefty. Ironic that Jeremy Corbyn was probably more in tune with leaving the EU, and Theresa May was more in tune with staying in it. But that's a whole other story. But what we got was this kind of defined politics where we watched those debates on TV. Look, there's Corbyn. That's what he believes. Since I've been a kid, he's believed this stuff. He still believes this stuff. There's Theresa May. There's her position. You got you knew what you were getting, more or less. With Starmer, as I sit here today, and I'm being genuinely objective, James, I honestly do not know what Keir Starmer stands for or really thinks.
Yeah, you and me both, Ian. I mean, this is one thing we do agree on, is that he didn't stand for anything. And look, there was the issues during the Corbyn years were ideological issues that we have on the left. Lefties have this built into us, this idea of ideological purity, an obsession with fighting our own side, with trying to be, one-up each other on who's more righteous than the other. I hate that about the left, and I'm a lefty. But we overcorrected when Keir Starmer came in. You have to remember that Starmer was elected Labour leader when he was selected as that, because he said he would continue with many of the policies, but with a respect for pragmatism and communication. It turned out none of that was true, and instead we overcorrected where we had no ideology. Politics has to have politics in it. We often say we don't want politicians, we want normal people run the country. That's not what, that's not what politics is. You have to have beliefs. You have to stand by something. And hopefully, I'm nervous about Andy Burnham. Of course I am. I don't know what influence has been exerted on him at present. I know they're massive. But I hope that he sticks to what he wants. And he manages to lead with a vision. We'll just have to see what it is.
Yeah, indeed. And we get, look, you're never going to say anything good about Nigel Farage. I get that, but I do know what he stands for. And I wouldn't say anything good about Zach Polanski, but I also know what he stands for. And that's really what we want, isn't it? We want a little bit of clarity, rather than, and when you look at Keir Starmer now, I just don't think he was very good at being a Prime Minister. I don't think he was a great communicator, and he was a little bit uncomfortable, a bit clunky in that. And I know that's not it's not the only criteria, but you take the point.
Yeah, he was a civil servant, wasn't he? Not a politician, and that's the reality. And we need people like that. He ran the CPS very effectively. He would have run a government department excellently. I think he was a good minister. But that top job has to be about, how do you see the country? What do you want to do with the power that we give you? Now, Nigel Farage, right? Listen, he's the antithesis of my politics. I despise him. I don't like him personally either. But you're absolutely right in that I do know what he stands for. It's clear to people what he stands for. When people vote for him, I can't say, as much as I would like to, they didn't know what they were voting for, because it's pretty clear, let's be honest. Yeah. But what I would say is people like me, progressives, should want to defeat Farage by putting our best foot forward and by actually leading with what we think and winning arguments. Ian, I come on here for a reason, and we might disagree on lots of things, but it's so that we can have that debate and the argument, because I want to win it. I want to be able to put my side across. With Starmer, there was none of that. Yeah,
absolutely. I know you're more of a Rupert Lowe man at heart, to be honest. Listen, James, just on that point, you mentioned about what does Starmer stand for. There was apparently a bit of an opportunity where we could have had a glance at that early doors for Mr Burnham to face Parliament, and so he could take questions from across the House. And the Conservatives led a vote to force him to face a bit of scrutiny. It was kind of kicked out, and Labour have now been accused of running scared after this. Do you think that would have been a good idea, to at least have a bit of a session with a new Prime Minister?
It would have been nice, but he needs all the time he can get, doesn't he? If I was advising him, I would have said push against it. Also, you have to remember, recess, it was about the end. It was about recess coming in and extending the parliamentary term by 1 day, by a Monday, so that they could do it. So, it's a bit of political mischief at the end of the day. He could have done it as a big kind of, moment, but he would have lost the momentum afterwards, because recess would have happened. And then on top of that, I would have said anyway, he needs all the time he can get to try and put his ducks in a row. I'm sure everyone would agree with that.
What do you sense, James? And I know it's very hard to answer this, but, we know that Andy Burnham has been a bit blairy in a previous election campaign to become leader, and then he was a bit Corbyn-y in another one. So, we might end up with more of the same. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say he has got an inner philosophy. What do you imagine that one of the first significant, not specifics, but one of the significant areas he's going to look at?
I think it's got to be on, and this has always been Andy Burnham's interest, especially with him going out of the regions. I think it's probably going to be on, devolution stuff. And I know people are bored of hearing it already. This is something that's close to his heart, and it's central to his vision, it seems, as to how you run this country. He wants to take on the office of Prime Minister, the highest office in the land, and give away some of its power. And yeah, people might say that it's gimmicky, the number 10 of the North thing, but I speak as a Northerner, and I'll tell you now that, so many people over the years have been disenfranchised, not just in places like Scotland, like where I am now, where they are like literally wanting to break away from the UK, but in places all over the north. Wales, exactly the same, Northern Ireland. So he'll want to try and reach out to those communities.
But what about those people in Essex and Kent feel the same? That's the irony. I think that's often missed in this story. That
I don't think it's one or the other, though. I don't think he's saying one or the other. I think he's just saying, outside of London, because we know the commentariat. Everybody sits in London. It is the political capital of the world.
But that's why, isn't it? It's a big. If you could move it to, I'd be fine if it all moved to Manchester. I couldn't care about that, or whether it all moved to Newcastle or Glasgow or something. It's going to be somewhere, isn't it? You're going to have an epicentre somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you should. I mean, I've long said it should be in Newcastle, but that's just a Geordie bias for you. I'm happy if it was in Leeds.
Well, that's because you can do it on. That's because you could go on the bus, isn't it? Rather than having.
Yeah. But the cost of these things would be more than they'd be worthwhile doing, I think, long term. So I think often, while it might look gimmicky, I think the thing we should expect to see Andy Burnham doing is touring the UK, actually getting out, because Starmer didn't like talking to people, right? Look, I have every sympathy for that, Ian. I'm also a miserable introvert a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Well, you can't be the Prime Minister of the country and sit in your bunker and not know what's going on out and about.
It's fair. James, thank you very much indeed for that. James Mathewson, former Labour Party spokesman and political commentator. He's keeping his powder dry on Andy Burnham a little there. What's he likely to do? My overarching instinct is that Andy Burnham will, I think we can definitely say this about him, he will appear to be more accessible, more earthy, sound a bit more like the bloke you might meet down at the pub. Never lose sight of the fact that he is a professional politician. He's only ever been a professional politician or worked in the corridors of Westminster. That's all he's ever done. He's got no other experience. And in common with many others, left-wing or right-wing, he has a burning furnace of ambition in the pit of his belly that most of us would never recognise. He craves power. He wants the big job. So let's just get that out the way. He will, however, sound better doing it. The dispatch box, he'll be more comfortable. Pressing the flesh on the international stage, he'll look a little bit more relaxed. But will he be a good Prime Minister? And you see, I'm sensing here we might, in terms of policy, kind of get more of the same. We might get more of what we've had for the last couple of years. This one in from Richie who says, entitled Karens getting arrested by American cops on YouTube is also my guilty secret. It's taken over from killers being caught 30 years later. They're always good, those kind of courtroom dramas, killers getting caught, people who thought they got away with it. But the entitled Karens is absolutely fascinating. I've got to move on to something else. Because, of course, the more you watch them, the more they feed that up to you on your homepage, right? And they're just an easy thing to watch on the way home. It's always the same scripts as well. It always is the same script. Somebody who would have got away with a warning or a speeding ticket ends up in the cuffs on the floor, going to jail and getting fined $1,000 just because, really, of their attitude. I love them. This one in from John in Sutton. Reform are fighting the establishment who will do anything to stop reform from governing Britain, says John. Let's go to David in Gloucestershire on that issue of protection for MPs and whether it's particularly reform politicians that need those levels of protection. David, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are we all?
Very good, thank you. Far away.
Well, I was just saying to your producer, researcher, that I don't disagree with the policy, but, and I'm going to say this, how far do you go? Because, unfortunately, Anne Widdecombe would not have been protected under this policy because she wasn't an MP.
True.
So, are you going to have to protect everybody that's a prominent political figure or prominent person in the media, full stop. I mean, let's be honest, you could say about certain talk presenters, do they come out sometimes with the wrong words or somebody could be very offended by it and decide to attack. But when you hear that Nigel, I was just thinking about it after I made the phone call, and I just thought, well, after, they say they've had all these death threats. Well, I'm sorry, but we've got to now get serious about this. If you make a death threat to anybody, the police have got to come down on you. Maybe the first initial could be just a phone call. Hang on a minute, mate. We're watching you. But then when it gets serious, I'm sorry, but some people have got to be dragged into court and go to jail. I really do think that. I really get tough on people because it's just unacceptable.
People will always say that, they say stuff on social media because that you wouldn't say in real life. Because I genuinely think engagement in social media is... because that's where most of these threats tend to happen. But I'm sure some MPs still get emails and people who literally write letters. But the stuff that Nigel Farage is talking about is mostly on Twitter, it's other forms of social media. They would say, look, I didn't mean it. It just feels like this is the place to say outrageous stuff, right?
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. I mean, all right, you might get people like that, and maybe it just needs an email saying, calm your language, in the first instance. But then when it carries on, I mean, there was a case a few years ago, I don't know whether you remember, but they were saying about there was a chap or a person going around killing cats in a village somewhere or an area.
Yeah.
And somebody said, well, does it matter? Somebody said, yeah, but this is the start, and they will go on to become a serial killer.
There is, exactly that. But then you have to then bring in the other debate, don't you? When people say other things on social media that aren't specifically... I mean, the Lucy Connolly tweet is a good example. Now, the same people that might want people who threaten Nigel Farage arrested were advocating that Lucy Connolly... I mean, by the way, I don't think she should have been in jail either. But, she wrote something that wasn't very nice. She acknowledges all of that. I get it. So where do we draw the line? Is it death in particular? Is it, her tweet talked about people being burnt in hotels.
Well, yeah, I do, like I said. But I think, I think perhaps... you do have to look at it in context every time,
Of course you do. You'd have to have...
How often... my point is, how often are these people saying these things? And then with this particular case, with this suspect, I know we obviously can't talk about it, but, I mean, are we going to find out a lot more in the future? Has he been saying these things in the past? Has he been threatening or, he or she or whatever, blah, 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 are they known to the authorities, and I just don't know. But then it also comes to the threat to all of us. If there's a threat to MPs, is there a threat to all of us?
Well, yeah, I mean, how big is it? Are we in danger of inflaming how big the problem is here, David? Is it minor or it's always going to be there at some level? In the next 50 years, sadly, there will be other victims of public anger in whatever form who work in the world of politics.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, we obviously know about the Joe Cox, David Amos, and now Widdecombe. But as you said before, there was a chap was on the radio the other day, and he said, "But this, your chap earlier," and he said, "Well, this has been happening for hundreds of years."
Yeah, he was going back to the Duke of Wellington and the like, where very similar things were happening.
Yeah.
Listen. It's always an interesting one to debate, but one we should always take seriously. David, thank you. David in Gloucestershire. Thank you to him. Your thoughts on that, about specifically whether reform, because it was alluded to that reform politicians are a very particular target for danger. Do you sense that? And if so, why is that? What is your thinking behind? I know there's some obvious answers, but do feel free to explore it. People on the left would also say that actually they are regularly attacked by the kind of neo-Nazi sort of brigade who want to have a pop at anyone that's just sort of to the left of Rupert Lowe. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
comments from a fool, really. I mean, you don't have to be intelligent to be a politician, but it does help. You know, if he's going to talk about it, he needs to, if he's going to make historical references, he needs to read history correctly. Argentina weren't even a country as when we occupied the islands. They were called the Nation of States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. The kind of abuse. There is a sort of kind of an example. When people used to write letters of abuse, when it wasn't just there wasn't any social media, there wasn't any texting or emailing either, for that matter. This is like literally seems like half an hour ago. So a lot of years back, when I first worked at the original Talk Radio, I don't even know if Finn knows this about me, but so I wrote this book called I Bet You Won't Read This. And it was based on the fact that people would write letters in, like horrible letters of criticism, and almost always would say at some point in the letter, I bet you won't read this out. It's like, well, why have you written it then? Or I bet you won't read this even. So why would you write a letter that you think there's a good chance that the person you're sending it to is not going to read? And sometimes it would be just a sort of short thing written on a scrap of paper it looked like it was written either by the Omen or by a child, almost in crayon. And it would just be abusive stuff. But other times, people would write 6 or 7 pages, handwritten letters about how awful they thought you were, why you should lose your job, why you have no right to the same. I mean, it was bizarre. They were few and far between. There was enough of them to put in a book, which we self-published on our own programme, and it sold loads. It was extraordinary. We republished the letters, leaving any names out. People never left their names and addresses on these things. But in a way, that was more bizarre, because you look at Twitter, and it's very instant. You can write something on social media, someone disagrees with you, they write something inflammatory back, bang, that quickly. But the idea that you sit down with a set of paper, a load of paper and a pen, write it out in longhand, put it in an envelope, walk to the post box, stick a stamp on it and post it. I mean, that in some respects is more disturbing than what we have now. We just have it more now in terms of amounts, but in terms of motive, some of those letters were far more disturbing than a lot of what you see today. And that was just a bloke doing a late night radio show, for God's sake, with his mates. What could we do to offend people? Kevin's in Basingstoke. Kevin, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine, thanks.
Good. What have you got for us? Fire away.
Well, I don't think Reform UK are any bigger threat than other politicians.
Okay.
We've had a Conservative and a Labour MP both murdered. Sadiq Khan and Diane Abbott, I mean, they get death threats all the time. I mean, we had...
That's a good point. Diane Abbott would be a good example of somebody who gets an awful lot.
We had a Tory donor donated millions to the Conservatives, said that looking at her face makes him angry and she should be shot. So, I mean, what's the Nigel Farage had? He's had 2 milkshakes and a plastic and a paper cup.
And 600 death threats, one resulting in a man getting arrested.
Well, I mean,
about half an hour ago.
Yeah, but he said that his house was firebombed, but that wasn't true. He said, I mean, it was a burglary, and he also said he had his wheels tampered with when he was in France or something, and that wasn't true either.
I don't know if it wasn't true or whether it was whether somebody couldn't find the evidence.
No.
I don't think anybody's going to disagree, Kevin, that Nigel Farage gets a lot of stick.
No, let me just finish that about the wheels. If somebody tampered with his wheels and the mechanic thought that this was true, by law he had to report it and log it, and that was no evidence that ever happened. There's no evidence that his house was firebombed. Keir Starmer's house was firebombed, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that was in a different category, though, right?
What? What do you mean?
The motive behind it was very different.
I don't know what the motive was, but it was firebombed. I mean, Nigel Farage said it wasn't, but it was.
I don't even remember the Nigel Farage my house was firebombed story.
Yeah, he said his house was firebombed. So just look it up. He said his phones were hacked by the Russians. That wasn't true either, was it?
That his phone? I have no idea.
Well, he didn't provide any evidence. I mean, there's an inquiry into it because he didn't report it to the police.
I've no idea. I don't even know about phone hacking or firebombs. I'm not being facetious. I genuinely don't know, Kevin. But what I do know is that he would sit up there in the top 10 of parliamentarians that get that level of abuse.
And I'll say one more thing, because I know I haven't got long. If he feels that he's such at risk, why did he turn down police protection? Those police, he was offered the same protection as Kemi and top cabinet ministers, and he turned it down. And they are armed. They can be armed.
They can be. I don't know what the reasons were. I can only imagine there would have been a reason. I don't think he would have just turned it down for a giggle.
He said it wasn't good enough. I mean, armed protection officers from the police, they must have so much more information about, security than three big men in a flashy BMW.
I've no idea. Again, I don't know what. I can't second guess what somebody else was thinking or doing.
You honestly don't think police protection could be is not better? Protect.
I think, yeah, but I don't know on what grounds. Nigel, but they talked about it not being good enough, whether it was offered on a temporary basis, whether it was offered for only X amount of days in a constituency. I don't know the details of it. And maybe Nigel Farage won't release the details of it.
Well, I mean, he won't release the details of it because he doesn't want. Why doesn't he? Why did he turn it down? Is it because? Well,
I just said I don't. Well, you don't know, and I don't know, so I can only guess there was something a bit more to it than.
Because he knows that he's not in any more danger. Otherwise, he would have taken it up.
I think there is no doubt that Nigel Farage, if the word is danger or vulnerability, is up there.
Maybe he doesn't want people to know what he's up to or where he's going.
Well, he can't do anything about that. He's followed around by the press wherever he goes.
No, not all the time. He's not followed all the time by the press, is he? 24 hours a day.
Well, maybe not 24 hours a day, but probably more than most MPs.
He said that he voted by post once, and he took there was no record of him. He said he took his postal vote to the sort of office where the place where you actually do vote. He said he didn't post it. There was no pictures of him doing that, and I think that would have been if that wasn't no press about that, then I don't think they follow him around all the time.
Yeah, they pretty much do.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, what? I don't think he's.
I mean, if you're a leader of a party and you're a leader of a party that's fairly controversial, it doesn't mean you're followed around in the same way they would follow Hugh Grant. But in salient moments, you would gain more attention as a leader of a party. They're always on an announcement. They're always on manoeuvres. They're always campaigning. So it's not that weird that you'd be followed around disproportionately so than Bobby Fitzwilliam, the MP for Upper Dicker.
Yeah, but he said that he doesn't do face-to-face surgeries in Clacton because of security risk. He's been given £5 million from a crypto billionaire, and George Cottrell, he provides him with security.
Maybe it's because they think people like you are around, Kev. That's why they need security.
I've never been violent to anybody in my life.
No, you don't have to be violent. You could just be a pain in the arse, couldn't you?
No, I wouldn't hassle him. Why would I do that? I wouldn't.
I've no idea. You sound like a super fan. Listen, Kev, I've got to run for no other reason than time and a tiny bit of boredom. It's just gone 2:30. More from you on the way. Keep it here. It's Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Now, first it was a total ban for under 16s. We remember this. Now the government wants 16 and 17-year-olds locked out of Instagram, TikTok and YouTube overnight too, from midnight to 6 a.m. Like a curfew, a ban on addictive features like infinite scroll. But unlike the under 16s ban, teenagers here can simply opt out whenever they like. I'm not sure that really is going to... No, scrap that. That isn't going to work, is it? I mean, it's as simple as that. Let's speak to Dr. Sanjeev Nachini, who is a consultant paediatrician. Sanjeev, good afternoon to you. Nice to speak on this again. I mean, if it's optional, there's no 16-year-old on the planet that's going to go, well, Keir Starmer told me I'm not allowed to look at my phone, so I better put it away.
I think it's pathetic and very disappointing. It's a cop-out.
Yeah.
We are allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to continue to be exposed to the most addictive smartphones, devices, and social media apps on the planet. It is very poor, and I don't think we are not safeguarding them from the dangers of social media and smartphones as we should.
What is your sense of this overarching debate, Sanjeev, in terms of many people, many campaigners, whether they're parents, whether they're clinicians like yourself, everyone has their own idea of what a ban should or could look like. And there's some commonality, of course, between lots of people. And then there are others who have different. And then, of course, there's the other view that, free speech is free speech. And even if it's uncomfortable or awkward, sort of the Elon Musk-esque view of things, anything goes, doesn't matter how brutal or awful it is. People make their own mind. There's that kind of line. Is there, for you, when it comes to kids, are governments, particularly our government, are they missing something, even in their initial suggestion of an under-16s ban?
Yes, they are missing the fact that children and teenagers, particularly under the age of 18, in fact, even early 20s, are extremely vulnerable to these toxic, addictive algorithms, to the infinite scrolling, to the autoplay, and the dopamine hits. Their brains are physiologically made like that. They're developing, and that is what makes them more vulnerable. So yes, the government has completely missed anatomy and physiology and development of teenagers. Therefore, a ban should be exactly that. No ifs, no buts, no partial, nothing, a complete and total ban. It's quite simple, actually. But as we seem to do in this country far too often, we complicate what is very simple.
Yeah.
And with regards to free speech, yeah, that's all for the birds as far as I'm concerned. We have to protect children and teenagers who are developing from these toxic, addictive apps. When they're adults, yes, free speech, all of that comes into play. But for now, when their brains are metamorphosizing, then they need to be protected and safeguarded.
Is it because governments are scared? Because it is a big area, isn't it? Free speech and the like. And of course, many people in areas of whether they're parents or, you know, sometimes even people say, look, you know, you can't get rid of social media. Is part of us now. It's part of the fabric of who we are.
Yes, although given the negative and toxic effects, I call it anti-social media, given what it's done to legions of children and teenagers. You know, we have to take a stand. As I've said many times before, we do not allow 16 and 17-year-olds to sample alcohol just because they're going to be drinking after a certain age. Neither do we allow them to smoke cigarettes for the same reason. We are not going to break them in. So why should we do the same for 16 and 17-year-olds? I mean, to give them sort of permission or allow them to break a curfew after 12 when they should be sleeping, when sleep is so crucial to their health.
Yeah.
It's just completely idiotic.
I get it. Sanjeev, great to have you on again. Thank you very much indeed. Sanjeev Nachini, Dr. Sanjeev Nachini, consultant paediatrician, on that never-ending... It's a bit of a conundrum for people, isn't it? Some people talk about it being, it's a backdoor to digital ID. Well, maybe that is that would be an option. I don't think that's the reason for it, by the way. I think the reason for it is that there is quite a lot of medical and cultural, social evidence that, you know, kids scrolling and endlessly looking at social media, whether it's daft videos, even if you're looking, I mean, some of the, we could have got in with it more, into it more with Sanjeev there, perhaps on a different tangent of this debate. It doesn't have to be bad stuff you're looking at. It doesn't mean you're looking at porn. It doesn't mean you're looking at racism or homophobia. I mean, it may well be all of those things, which would be a problem, but it could just be a fact that the doom scrolling itself, regardless of what it is, just ain't good for your head. It's just a very bad way. You focus on it in a way you don't focus. The screen is the demon of the piece. Okay, the screen does something for you the other elements of entertainment or stimulation, including a normal TV set, doesn't do. Nobody ever... I mean, of course, people can watch TV all night, but it hasn't got the same addictive qualities. If you've ever... What was that? There was a Netflix documentary. Was it called The Social Network or something? Was that the one? I think it largely focused on Facebook. I think it was called The Social Network. Yeah. And it was really good. I watched it a couple of years ago. It's been out a few years now. It is worth looking at. It is rather interesting. I mean, these things were built to be addictive. That's the whole point. There was no other, purpose really. And so even if you're watching something that's innocuous, it can be, it can be troubling for kids. Because we know as adults, we all do it from time to time. You sit there and you're on the doom scroll and it's nonsense and you're not really looking at anything. What you have is the world's most diverse magazine right on your phone in your hand. The Social Dilemma, that's what it was. Or just Social Dilemma. Or was it The Social Dilemma? I only say that because, every now and then there used to be this sort of joke that older people said the Facebook. And Facebook was called The Facebook. Did you know that, Finn? That was actually the name of Facebook. The Facebook. So when your nan would go, are you on the Facebook? People would go, this is such an old thing to say, Nan. Nan was right. The Facebook. The Social Dilemma, that was it. It's worth a look, just in terms of what it sort of set out to do and what it does. Nick is down in London. What have you got for us, Nick? Good afternoon.
Yes, hello, and I hope you're well.
Yeah.
Talking earlier about how the politics has gotten nastier.
Yes.
And that seems to me to have started relatively recently. I don't recall during Thatcher's era. I mean, people disagree hugely with Thatcher, but there wasn't the blind visceral hatred.
Unless you were... I tell you, we're going to try and call you back, Nick, because your line is a bit iffy. But I'd love to pick up on that point that you mentioned on on Thatcher. Rach in Newcastle says, Ian, make it make sense. Burnham wants to devolve more powers to the regions, yet back in Europe and give all power to them. Is it that he wants everyone else to make decisions and he can't make any? It's such a yes, make it make sense. Rach is absolutely bang on. I can't work it out either. I could never work out why, you know, the SNP, when they had the referendum on Scottish independence, were really big on the fact that, you know, we don't want Westminster ruling us. What do you know down there about what goes on up here? It was that kind of vibe. You know, it was a very sort of anti-London thing, anti-English thing, really. We don't want any of that. However, we're perfectly relaxed about Brussels doing it. I was like, really? How did that? That's just a bit weird, isn't it? You don't want the old cockneys down there telling us what to do. Southerners, dirty, filthy lot, with their Rolls Royces and their streets of gold, as the urban myth suggests. But it's fine. Brussels, yeah, they're the good guys. Let them run stuff. Really bizarre. It's a bit of that. What Andy Burnham is doing is playing a kind of class war thing. Nothing more than that. It's a ridiculous scenario. We are a country the size of a postage stamp. Manchester's been left out. Yeah, people in Folkestone in Kent argue exactly the same thing, all right? We have a capital city. It's the epicentre of stuff. It's where our MPs work. It's called the Houses of Parliament. It's the residency, officially, of the King of the country. It's called Buckingham Palace. The PM lives there. It's called Downing Street. Therefore, institutions and the bulk of the civil service are bound to work there. It would be weird if they didn't, not exclusively. There are lots of departments, satellite areas around the country. Don't apologise for it. Move the capital. I couldn't give a fig if you moved the capital city. The same arguments would just happen again in a different part of the country. It's a non-argument, but it sounds like you're a kind of caring, understanding PM. It's BS, as far as I'm concerned, from Andy Burnham. Not a good start. Nick, we've got you back on a better line, Nick. Do continue. You were talking about how you don't remember the Thatcher years being quite so violent and argumentative.
Well, no, it's all rude. I mean, people disagreed vehemently with her. But it wasn't so personally rude as it seems to be now. And the political parties attacking each other. You were about the Scots Nats, and during the 2014 referendum, my parents were up there, and they were saying their groups of Scots Nats supporters were going round physically overturning, attacking people, campaigning to stay in the United Kingdom. The police were just standing by, watching all this happen.
It did. It's funny you say that. And listen, Nick, you've got the bulk of your point out. Sadly, your phone line is still pretty tricky, but I've got the bulk of what you're saying there, and thank you for raising it, because yesterday somebody said, because we were focusing a bit on Brexit when we talk about how politics became so toxic. Brexit is obviously a bit of a pivotal point that shows huge divisions and almost an irredeemable polarity in how the country thinks and how it divides up. But a couple of people got in touch and said, actually, the Scottish referendum was responsible for that. It perhaps depends on how engaged you were in it if you weren't in Scotland. But you're absolutely right. The nationalists in Scotland were evangelical about this one. This was not an argument that was being had in pubs and clubs in a cosy kind of way. It wasn't a little lofty meeting at the WI. Where you could discuss over a rendition of Jerusalem and an iced fancy, whether you were in or out. It was nothing like that. It was vicious. The arguments were vicious. And they were also nonsensical as well. McBrucey in Dumfries, who I was about to say I've been communicating with for many years, but McBrucey has certainly been contributing in a brilliant way, in all sorts of ways. McBrucey said, I randomly got a copy of 2 of your books free off a taxi driver a few years back. After talking about the show, he said he had the books and gave them to me the next time I was in the taxi. Now, this is called dealing, all right? And it should be frowned upon. These books were available for sale, McBrucey, not to be willy-nilly passed around in the back of a manky old cab. in the middle of Dumfries on a November's evening. I made up the state of the cab and indeed the time of year. Great that they were passed around in whatever capacity. One was self-published and the other one was, I don't know if it was the same, he got a copy of 2 of the same book or 1 of each. I'm quite impressed, but the cab driver had both of them, but slightly disappointed that he wanted to get rid of them, which is fine. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000.
The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Go on a big holiday. Immigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 83338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. This is a network promotion, full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
From a fool, really. I mean, you don't have to be intelligent to be a politician, but it does help. You know, if he's going to talk about it, he needs to, if he's going to make historical references, he needs to read history correctly. Argentina weren't even a country as when we occupied the islands. They were called the Nation of States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 10 to 3, and we've got a brand new Voice of Doom. We did one yesterday. It was a voice that was 114 years old, I'm not even kidding you, of Teddy Roosevelt, who was like the 26th president of the United States. 114 years old. It's still blowing my mind, even now. And we thought, no one's going to get this. And about 100 people got it absolutely bang on. For those who don't know, this is a mystery voice, but it's political. So it's always a politician or somebody obviously connected to politics that you are looking for. There are no prizes. It's simply the kudos of saying, I won the Voice of Doom. So let's have a listen to the brand... I haven't heard this, by the way. This is the brand new voice.
What the issue is about.
And again.
What the issue is about.
And again.
What the issue is about.
87222, if you know who that is. 87222. I reckon that's going to go. I think I know who it is. Well, I do know who it is because I suggested it. I've only just remembered that. I just hadn't heard it played out loud. No, I listened to it very quickly on the laptop, but yeah, there it is. That's the full whack for you. Who is this?
What the issue is about.
87222 if you think you know. As ever, if we get a winner, we'll tell you in the next hour. If not, it rolls over to tomorrow. Shall I have one more sneaky listen?
What the issue is about.
There it is. This one comes in from Sarah in Sussex by the sea, who says, in 2018, Sheffield University produced a report on the abuse received by MPs. It concluded that Tories received the most abuse, and while Diane Abbott claims she was the most abused MP, she was not. but was the most abused of all female MPs. Reform's proposal to provide all MPs with security is unworkable and unaffordable. There is a tendency for MPs on the right to receive the most abuse. When in power, the left has had its fair share of abuse, but generally receives far less. The left is incapable and even not prepared to engage in debate. The mere fact you hold an opposing view, no matter what the facts are, is enough to be on the receiving end of abuse. The object is clear. Abuse is designed to make you go away, and then there's no need to deal with you. Such polarisation is unhealthy, and, as recent days have shown us, dangerous. R.I.P. Widders. Yeah, I get that. I'd be interested to know, in Sheffield University's 2018 report, who was the most abused MP. I know that Diane Abbott does get large doses of it. You also have to get into, you know, what is abuse? Is it abuse because she did a car crash radio interview, as Diane Abbott famously did, or appeared with me on stage at a police conference and couldn't find her way off the stage? Which was very funny at the time. That made its way onto Have I Got News For You and a few other places for a couple of weeks. And obviously she got stick for that. But that was more sort of gentle ribbing at somebody. Actual abuse, I wonder who was at the top of that list. I would, despite what a previous caller said, was it Mark in Basingstoke we spoke to, Finn, before the news? Kevin in Basingstoke. Kevin was kind of suspicious that Nigel Farage gets any more abuse than anyone else. I think most of us could probably understand that somebody like Nigel Farage would get a lot of stick. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to Peter in Liverpool. Peter, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
These wild comments. I think the Prime Minister was so quick after Southport to stand up and call everybody right-wing, and he didn't take into account any natural anger that maybe Lucy Connolly had felt at the time and her own personal circumstances. He locked her up for 3 years. He had...
Well, he didn't lock her up.
Well, the so-called injustice system we have in this country, these people... He had an army of people scouring the internet for comments. Yeah, I don't see that now. I don't see people getting knocks on the door, the left-wingers getting knocks on the door and being fast-tracked into prison.
Well, during a riot situation, there is a fast-track system that kicks in, whether it was in 2011 under the Tories or whether it was after Southport. So that's not specifically something that's happened for the first time under Starmer.
No, but I would say the comments, there've been such bad comments, and even from Labour Minister. I haven't heard Starmer made a comment about that, to rebuke this person.
When you say Labour Minister, who are you talking about?
Is it... I was just looking at it. She's the Minister for Safety or Women's Safety.
Oh, this was recently, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, when she talked about Nigel Farage and his army of bin men.
Yeah, well, yeah, and she said it was kind of false outrage over Anne Widdecombe's murder, you know.
Yeah.
Which she's apologised for.
But I don't know whether that would ever be seen as a criminal offence rather than just a sort of fairly sick... Yeah. And by the way, I don't...
That was a criminal offence.
Indeed.
But what I'm saying is a lot of the comments that have been made out there are so disgusting. They're on a par with what people have been locked up for.
Well, that's what I find interesting, is what do we... Because I don't think anybody should be locked up for these kind of things, personally, and I'm sure you don't. I'm sure you don't either, Peter. But let's find out where the line is. I mean, what is lock-upable and what isn't? Is it hate speech or is it criminal speech?
I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
If you were a copper on the lowest ladder, would you, if your boss turned around to you and said, I want you to go and knock at somebody's door at 12 o'clock at night, and I want you to arrest them for a tweet, could you stay in that job?
I've often thought about this. I was out with a load of coppers the other night, to be honest, Peter. These are people that are as hard as nails and as brave as you like, and I can't imagine any single one of them. I never got into this conversation, by the way, but I can't imagine any single one of them would join the police force to go and knock on someone's door over a tweet.
But somebody does it.
But somebody does it. Now, I can only think, you know, if you're the, you know, you're told by your chief, right, there's an incident, don't be thinking it doesn't mean anything just because it's a tweet. There's more to it than that. Go and arrest them. It's the amount of people that arrest. It's not just the fact that there's a knock on the door. It's 3 police vans that's the problem.
Yeah, and it's the way they go about it, yeah. But I was brought up in a world where we didn't have all this hate, you know, hurty feelings. And if you disagreed with someone, you told them.
Yeah.
Same as I think I've spoke to you before. You know, I was no Maggie Thatcher lover in her day, but you know, you voted and that was the decision. And today, it's gotten really violent.
I do wonder what kind of Prime Minister Keir Starmer would have been without Twitter. Would he have been? Would we have a completely different opinion of? Would he still be there? You know, Pete. Listen, I've got to move because the news is upon us. Some great points there. Thank you for those, Peter in Liverpool, on the issue of free speech. And what is the line on that as well? Keir Starmer, man, did he blow it over after Southcliffe? Did he blow it? And he just needed one very simple sentence in between talking about rioters and the genuine issues of concern and safety of kids. 0344 499 1000. Let's get the news at 3 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Our afternoon. Yes, welcome back. It is the Home of Common Sense, just coming up on 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. So, Nigel Farage, 597 death threats against him since February. A targeted attack that killed Anne Widdecombe, and now counter-terror police are investigating whether other Reform politicians were also targets. And the Telegraph in the last hour or so has revealed that a man has been arrested for threatening to kill Nigel Farage. Are Reform more vulnerable than other politicians? What are your thoughts on that? Are they specifically targeted? Also, Keir Starmer faced Kemi Badenoch for the very last Prime Minister's question. It must be a bit of a moment, isn't it? I don't really want to cut Keir Starmer too much slack, but that must have been a moment when you thought, I ain't ever going to do this again. This is before he hands over the reins to Andy Burnham on Monday, after a premiership, of course, a little more than 2 years, marred with local election disasters and a string of scandals and so many U-turns we've lost count. And Argentine fans set fire to a Union flag on the streets of Buenos Aires in wild celebrations when they reached the semi-finals. Now England must prepare for a tie steeped in history when the two sides meet tonight in what promises to be one of the greatest games of the tournament. I have to say, I literally cannot wait. I'm so excited about tonight. Finn, are you sharing that? I am so excited. It's like you don't get that excited as an adult very often, like a kid does about something. I'm definitely more excited than my kids on this. Looking forward to it, and a few ales thrown into the mix as well. Lots to talk about, everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Now, work an extra year and lose £12,500. What a deal. That's what 5 million people in their late 40s and 50s now face. This is after the Treasury told the OBR the pension age is rising to 68 by 2037, 7 years earlier than previously planned. Ryan Shorthouse is the founder and chair of Bright Blue. Good afternoon to you, Ryan. It's that old kind of, the waspy women thing, isn't it? They have to set the date somewhere, and if you're in that cohort, then it's tough, apparently. Is that what we have to do, just take it on the chin?
Well, we have elections, so we elect politicians, different political parties, and they have different priorities. So, when I signed up to work in the labour market, there were certain tax rates, and there are different tax rates now, and I'm paying more tax. The fundamental thing is that we're not growing, and we have debt, public debt, net public debt, which is equivalent to the size of the economy. We need to bring it down if we're going to raise living standards and sustain the type of living that particularly older generations have enjoyed over the past few decades. And one part of that is reducing the huge amount of expenditure, which is on state pension. It takes up about 43% of all welfare spending. So it is very significant. And what is driving a lot of our public spending is age-related expenditure. People are living longer, they're getting older. That's a great thing, but it means that there's more cost for our healthcare and our pensions. So the Conservative government, the last Conservative government, proposed bringing forward the raising of the state pension age to 68 to the late 2030s rather than in the mid 2040s, and that would save $6 billion a year, which is a hell of a lot of money. Labour government haven't said whether they'll do that, but the OBR have made their forecasts on that basis, and I think they should proceed with that at the very least. Yeah. There's much more that can be done and should be done.
It's always interesting, isn't it, when different governments of different types come up with these announcements, because I don't think there's ever been such a thing as an MP that has gone into work one day, or a minister, and gone, I've got an idea about pensions. This clearly comes from elsewhere, right? This comes from the bean counters in the civil service, and that's what they're paid to do. People who look at the books and go, right, here you go, ministers, it's either going to be this or it's going to be that. There's your choice.
Well, I think lots of organisations and individuals have been campaigning to raise the age in which people retire. And I think because we're living longer and it's a huge expense on the public purse, we should be looking to do that. I personally feel that we should have a cultural norm in this country where people retire at 70, and we have policies to try and enable that. So, for example, we raise the state pension age, but we also look at the private pension age. So at the moment, people can start drawing down their private pension from the age of 55, will be the age of 57 by 2028. I think that's really low. It's ludicrously low. I think that needs to be increased, or at least the tax-free element of it, which
surely
is 25%.
Surely it needs to be
cost.
decreased, doesn't it?
No, I think it should be increased.
Get it down to 50, surely.
No, I think it should be increased because we should be encouraging people to work longer. And when I say work longer, everyone says, you know, what about people in manual work, people with ill health? Well, you know, I'm not necessarily talking about everybody working full time.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily saying everybody should be doing manual work. There's lots of stuff that people in their mid and late 60s could be doing. Dog walking, teaching assistants, childcare, working in a shop. There's a whole gardening, there's a whole range of things which they can be paid for, which they are perfectly capable of doing. And if you are in ill health, you are entitled already to draw down from your private pension earlier than the current 55 and 57. So at the end of the day, your pension income is there to cover your retirement. It's not there to compensate for ill health. We have other benefits available, like personal independence payments for people who are disabled, to cover that and support that. But at the end of the day, we have a debt, a public debt, which is equivalent to the size of the economy now. And we need to bring that down. And a major reason for that is pension-related expenditure. Everybody's got to play a part. You know, it's basically a fairy tale to say that we can continue to sustain the benefits that people receive, the public services people receive, without all of us contributing more. And that includes people over the age of 55.
It's interesting on the private pension thing, because I cashed in a private pension because I'd hit the age of 50 where you can do it. Obviously, the rules have changed now. And I did this because I took out the pension yonks ago and then stopped yonks ago. So it kind of just sat there, and it wasn't in the grander scheme of things. You know, it certainly wasn't retirement money, you know. It might have seen you all right for a few months, but it was in that ballpark rather than anything else. So I just thought, well, actually, that would be handy just to have. It wasn't part of my bigger financial plans. If it's private, does it matter? What's the relevant to the wider stake? Because some people would say, actually, 50 is a good age to, you know, maybe start to take your foot off the gas a little bit. And if you've got a private pension, you might have more than one, of course, then that doesn't harm the grander or the wider issue around the public finances because it's private.
Well, it is a private pension, but it is supported by and determined by government. So pensions remains the most tax-efficient investment vehicle that you can use, and there's very generous tax reliefs for that. And at the moment, government determines the age in which you can draw down from it. So it's not the case that it's totally private. Government is supporting it. The reliefs are supporting it. And my view is that we should be encouraging people to save in their private pension more, so they're less dependent on the basic state pension. So it's not true to say that it's entirely private and government
I get it.
has no support or rules around it, because it does. And look, at the end of the day, there's lots of evidence to suggest that people have better mental health and better physical health if they stay in work for longer. I'm not necessarily saying work full time, work, you know, on a really demanding manual job until you're 70. I think the best gift that older generations, who, I'm not saying everyone, but a lot of them have been quite lucky with, you know, their pensions and their housing. Not everybody, but a lot of people who are 60 and over. And I think the best gift they can now do to support not only their own kids, but wider younger generations is to work longer and be a net contributor to public finances rather than a net consumer.
I hear you. Ryan, thank you very much indeed for your time. Ryan Shorthouse, founder and chair of Bright Blue. It's interesting that Ryan thinks of sort of recalibration of expectation, that 70 should be the age when you think of retiring. It's down to you. Look, in an ideal world, we'd retire at 50, right? We'd all have plenty of dough. You'd go, that's it. I go on holiday 3 times a year. I can go out twice a week to a nice restaurant. On the other night, I can go to the cinema. Life's fantastic. That is really not that doable for many people, and it just isn't. Life is expensive. I mean, just a trip to the cinema, by the way, even on your Todd, can cost a few quid. I know you can get sort of an OAP Monday afternoon jobby, but generally speaking, People aspire to retire a bit earlier. And I think we live in an era. I know what he was saying. He was talking about the reality of the numbers game. It doesn't add up. You know, when people are living longer, that's got to be taken into account. We need to just call it what it is, a crisis if we don't address it. Retirement age 70. What's the average lifespan of a bloke in this country, Finn? Average lifespan of a male, is it something like 83? Is it something like 83? 79.1. Oh, I think a woman is maybe 83 or something like that. So 79.1. So 79. Woman is 83. So you retire at 70, you have 9 years of, like, hey, I've got to get up for work. I think most people want a bit more than 9 years, don't they? I genuinely do. I think most people want a bit more than that. And you look back at some of those, I often cite people that, you know, some of the oldies in my neck of the woods who retired years ago. I find it fascinating when you speak to somebody and go, yeah, I retired in 89. And you think, sorry, you retired in 89? They're about 90 now, so they're old, but fit and healthy, and they had good pensions, they had jobs that paid dynamic pensions that give them pretty much a not dissimilar income for the rest of their life. That kind of stuff doesn't exist anymore. And they do the 3 or 4 holidays a year thing. James is in Cheshire. James, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
I just wanted to go back to the query you raised earlier about reform and are they more susceptible to threats.
Yeah.
And you cited really social media as being a contributor to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the main media, mainstream media, also has some elements of that. And I sort of reference the example of one particular presenter on a rival station to you who broadcasts at 10 a.m. every day.
Yeah.
And you talk, if the words Nigel and Farage come up in the same sentence.
Farage, I think, is the pronunciation.
Yeah, Farage. And it just absolutely goes off on one. We then into Nazi, racist, fascist. And the extension of that, the narrative that sort of developed from that, is obviously it's all remnants of 1939. What's going on? And of course, 1939 relating to Hitler. So of course, Nigel Farage is seen as the future Hitler. And what we've had these stories in the past where people think, well, what would have happened if we'd managed to eradicate Hitler prior to 1939? What would life have been like? And that's been planted in people's brains by people like that particular presenter. I can name him if you want, but you maybe don't want me to.
No, I know exactly who he is. I used to work with him.
Yeah, and this is on almost like a daily basis. This guy sort of presents this narrative, and no wonder that we get incidents like with Anne Widdecombe, where it's people almost feel it's justification to go out and eradicate.
Are you allowed to? Because look, let's not dwell on one presenter, but just to pick up on that point. Some presenters, some journalists. Dan Hodges is getting quite a lot of stick at the moment for sticking with this sort of Nigel Farage reform donation story. He also stuck with Angela Rayner and her taxation, Boris Johnson and his parties. So it's not unusual. Some journalists do stick to a theme, and they find that it suits their thing. It suits their kind of genre, the type of way they write or broadcast. It's part of who they are. Is that such a bad thing?
I think it is.
It might be quite boring. I could give you that.
Yeah, I think they have to sort of accept other people's views and why there is a concern, for example, about immigration, why Nigel Farage is so popular, why there's just this sort of natural hatred towards him that almost like masks any of the legitimate causes and reasons that he might actually be quite so popular.
But people with those opinions as well, and this is probably going to involve the same person, also did the same with Brexit, right? Not let it go and carry it on for God knows how long. And when you join all the dots to these things, and they're usually people from fairly privileged backgrounds as well, which is kind of just makes it a bit more annoying. And I know that people from privileged backgrounds exist. That's not anyone's fault, and they're entitled to whatever view or opinion they like. We're not North Korea. But it is, to me, quite interesting. There always seems to be a sort of a kind of an anti-British thing, a sort of a hatred of not so much the flag, but tradition, convention, how we've done things. The dysfunctional left like nothing better than to mess things up a bit, right?
Well,
they don't like the order of events.
Yeah, I think there is that argument. I think also a lot of them tend to think themselves as slight intellectuals and slightly better than everybody else.
Yeah, it's a bit like, Starmer and his mates and the Chagos deal. I think the reason they don't want the Chagos deal is because they can't stomach the idea there's an island on the other side of the world that has a Union Jack flying above it. That disturbs them. And I think it's in that kind of category, the idea that we could go it alone and we don't need Brussels. That's terrible. Who do we think we are? That kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I do actually force myself to listen to this guy on an almost daily basis, just to sort of like almost like balance my brain up a little bit, because with respect, it can be a little bit of an echo chamber. So I do actually put myself out there to try and listen to the other argument. But when I hear him spouting on the way he does, I just think, well, it's just no wonder things like Anne Widdecombe happened, because he is almost legitimising it and also presenting a narrative.
Do you think he's legitimising it, or just, taking, sometimes an uncomfortable argument? So it's by the way, it's worth saying, because of the conversation we're having, James, when I worked at that place, I would come on in the evening and directly contradict what I'd heard him say earlier in the day. And I would, I wasn't hiding it. I would say, earlier in the day, you heard my colleague James say this, and, actually, he was completely wrong, and I'm now going to tell you why he's completely wrong. Now, and I would get a lot of stick from that, from people. How can you say that about a colleague? And I said, well, because it's a free speech format. That's the whole point. We don't have to all agree. And some would say, well, look, you don't like his view. Does it matter? And I suppose I get what you're saying, depending on how far you take it. When you start, if you introduce, you see it on social media a lot, people use the word Nazi, they throw that thing around, Hitler comparisons. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it is dangerous, right?
Yeah. And, I mean, the guy, I think, was on holiday about a week or two ago, been to Greece for a week, and the first thing he does when he comes back, bang, straight in, Nigel Farage, £5 million. Again, not let it go, even though he'd been talking about it, the week or two before.
Like he just left off from where he's finished the last sentence.
In the week, is there nothing more important that's happened than the £5 million story? I think
love it.
Probably has.
Listen, I love your view. I share that incredulity and that frustration that we all have, with different people at different times. Get it, James? Thank you. It's a great call. Thank you to James, who even shares the name, in Cheshire. Thank you to him. It's always interesting with radio. I got a couple of people the other day saying you must stop having Dan Hodges on. You are going to lose listeners, somebody said. And do you know what? That never ever happens. I mean, you'd have to really commit some kind of horrendous broadcasting howler, or if you write for a newspaper, a howler. I saw somebody writing to the Daily Mail saying you've got to fire Dan Hodges because you're losing readers. No, they're not. That's the point. They're not. And as James just said there, he was alluding to another radio station where there's a presenter who drives him nuts. But he listens every day. I mean, some people do take you to the brink where you can no longer... I mean, we've all got favourites and people we don't like, whether it's in the written press or broadcast media. Some breaking news. 8 men have been charged with rape and child sex offences as part of a grooming gang operation in South Wales. This is the Crown Prosecution Service. Gwent Police detectives said the exploitation activity took place in Newport, Swansea, London, Birmingham, Lancashire, Edinburgh and the Argyll and Bute areas of Scotland during the 1980s and the 90s. The men were arrested on Tuesday. They've been charged with more than 30 offences. According to the CPS, the charges relate to 8 victims who were children at the time of the alleged offences. The men, aged 54 to 73, are all British citizens and are bailed to appear before Newport Magistrates Court on Friday. And I suppose we will get more details. Lots to come. More comment from you on the way. 22 minutes after 3. This is Talk.
comments from a fool, really. I mean, you don't have to be intelligent to be a politician, but it does help. You know, if he's going to talk about it, he needs to, if he's going to make historical references, he needs to read history correctly. Argentina weren't even a country as when we occupied the islands. They were called the Nation of States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
What a deal. 0344 499 1000. This one from Ruri, who says, don't cap party donations, but use a percentage of all monies given to each party to help pay for MPs' protection. Also, stop paying a fortune to protect illegal people. Interesting. Voice of Doom, have we got to win it? It was day one of a brand new voice. Let's replay the voice. Here it is.
What the issue is about.
Who's that then? These are some of the guesses. John Redwood, no. David Mellor, Enoch Powell, Harold Macmillan, no. Malcolm Muggeridge, Douglas Murray, no. John Gummer, no. Cecil Parkinson, no. Paul Botang, no. Hermit Schmidt, no. Sir Michael Fabricant, no. But David in Air, was it the only one, Finn? Was it only David? Were there others? David in Air got it absolutely correct. It was the late Roy Jenkins. So day one, it's gone again. Roy Jenkins, he of course was a very high-profile parliamentarian and famously part of the SDP, along with David Steele, Owen, Shirley Williams and others. Roy Jenkins with the right answer. We've got to have a brand new one. That's the second day on the bounce. Both Finns Fort have gone on day one. We've got to do better. One here that comes in from Danny regarding 16-year-olds and curfews overnight for social media. I already banned phones from the bedroom for my kids. The oldest is 16. On a school night, I don't need a plant in Westminster to impose it. At the weekends, they can have as much as they want, but I still expect them to get up and function the next day. It's called teaching responsibility and restraint. Yeah, it is that, really. I wonder how much... I mean, if you let your kid... The trouble with YouTube... It will generally, by the way, I think YouTube is the best of the lot in terms of the company being loosely on top of it. And it will, because the algorithm, it's crucial to the product, it will serve up a replication of what you previously looked at. And whether it's shorts or whether it's longer videos, it will continue to give you more. So if you're always looking for videos of people cave diving, it will continue to give you those and similar ones in the genre. But once in a while there'll be a departure from that and out pops something you don't want a kid to see, and that's the problem. Now, a 7-year-old should not be on YouTube. I've got a 12 and a half, nearly 13-year-old who likes a bit of YouTube. And much of the time when he's shown me the stuff he's looked at, and I've looked at the stuff that he's looked at, it's, you know, he's watching fun stuff about gaming, pranking, just sports stuff, loves looking at goal scoring and stats and all of that. And that's brilliant when you serve it in that way. It's great. But I know that once in a while he's going to hear or see something on there that I would rather he didn't see. Now, how do you play that as a parent? How do you play that as a parent? This one from, I think I read Jeff's one out, didn't I? This one from Steve in Tunbridge Wells. Steve, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Oh, hello, Ian. Great show.
Thank you.
I'm ringing about your last guest and sort of about the burden of pensioners on the state.
Yes. Retire at 70 and be happy, Steve.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what it's always these young people. They come on there and they're saying old people should do this. They should work for longer. So my personal point of view is I'm 65 years old. I should have been retiring this year anyway.
Yep.
I got made redundant 2 years ago for no fault of my own. For the last 2 years, I've every day, every week looked for a job. I cannot get a job, right? But I get people coming on the radio telling me I should be walking dogs, doing gardening. I should be, working from home. How many dogs need walking? How many gardeners, what I'm saying? They don't sort of live in the real world, these people.
Dogs, it's 1.7 million. In Tunbridge Wells, it's 12,500.
Exactly. I mean,
I live down the road from you, so I happen to know.
Yeah, I happen
to know these stats.
I know exactly where you live.
It's a bit weird.
But my mate's done some plastering. My mate done some plastering for you.
Oh, I know exactly who he is. Yeah.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is,
he nearly became an MP, didn't he?
He did. That's right.
He did brilliantly as well.
My point is, we keep getting told that we should be working longer and we should be, whatever. But it's not that easy, we're not a burden, are we? I don't get any benefits, I don't get anything, but I'm told I'm a burden on the state and I should be working. Well, I think it's really strange. And why aren't people looking at public sector pensions?
Well, I think that's
strange.
I mean, I know they've addressed them a little bit, but even so, my God, I mean, how much money over the years has been spaffed on public pensions?
Yeah. Like my wife, she works for a school as she's on minimum wage, but her pension is like massive. It's like it's not relative to the job she does.
Yeah,
it's good for me.
So what's the state of play then in terms of job opportunities in your neck of the woods? What does that look like?
Well, there's not any, because everyone sort of says you have to go into the caring industry. We need carers.
Yeah.
I've applied for lots of caring jobs. You're 65 years old. Have you ever done it before? No. Well, we don't need you. It's all that.
What did you do before you were made redundant, Steve?
I was a printer. I used to work in London as a printer. And I've always been in an office. I'm not very practical. I can't.
So you can't help Clive out with his plastering.
Oh no, I'm not that practical. Yeah, but but you're saying your fellow was saying there's gardening jobs. I wouldn't know a weed from a flower. I could give it a go, but who wants an unprofessional gardener?
Yeah, I do. If somebody knocking on your here to do your 2-acre lawn, I'll give it a go.
Exactly,
no one wants to hear that, do they?
Yeah, no, exactly.
You want Alan Titchmarsh to show up?
Yeah, I just find these young people, they're sort of all these old people, they're a burden, and I don't know.
And what has it done to your prospects of retirement then, Steve? I mean, is this like, I don't know whether you'd kind of made a plan or had a loose idea of what you thought, how life was going to pan out when you stopped working? Did you have a target in that sense?
Well, to be fair, I never thought I was going to get old to start with.
That's true. When was that? That was never on the agenda when we were 18, was it?
Exactly. When you're young, you don't think you're going to get old, do you?
Yeah.
So obviously, I didn't plan to. And also, I worked for quite a good company, and I thought I'd be working up to retirement age. And then when it ended, it's like, what do I do now? And then, I've got to get a job. And I mean, people look at older people and think, they're not trying, they don't want a job, but they do. They want to work, but you can't do it.
Indeed. Listen,
It's amazing.
yeah, I think it is. Steve, listen, I've got to jog on because we've got to take a pause. But that's been a brilliant call. I really hope something shows up, and I'm sure. I know it sounds like a cliche. I'm sure it will. But thank you, Steve in Tunbridge Wells. It's just gone 3:30. We're going to take a brief pause. Back with more after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, 25 to 4. It would be remiss if we didn't have a bit more than just a nod to the biggest story, of course. Tonight, England face Argentina in the World Cup semi-final, and this fixture has never been just about football. We can talk about the Falklands, we can talk about Maradona's hand of God, Beckham's red card in '98, decades of history, politics, genuine animosity, all boiling down to 90 minutes tonight. Let's speak to Mahir Bose, award-winning journalist and author, knows a thing or two about this territory. Mahir, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
I mean, this is big, right? I mean, we can't really overplay it. There's no hyperbole here. This is big.
Oh, absolutely. This is very, very big. And England-Argentina always seems to be in the middle of controversy, even before the hand of God. The year England won the World Cup, the only time, and let's hope there's another one coming on Sunday, and we'll all get a bank holiday. There was the Argentinian player Ratin sent off, and Alf Ramsey, the winning manager, said, they play like animals and so on. And of course, as you mentioned, the hand of God, followed, of course, by Maradona's great goal. And the Argentinians are seeing this, as they've always seen playing England, as a political game, whereas the English players don't see it that way. Of course, they want to beat Argentina. Mind you, they haven't played Argentina for a long time. And Lionel Messi has never played against England. So all these are factors. Who knows if the Messi magic can work? And, of course, we have Hey Jude, don't we? So Hey Jude could be greater than Messi.
Well, indeed. I mean, I do think we sort of slightly self-flagellate on things that, we have a bit of a tricky game as we had on Saturday, and everybody's talking about we can't possibly be up there with Spain and Argentina and France and the like, although France no longer in the equation. But of course, Argentina have had some pretty messy games as well, no pun intended.
Absolutely. And frankly, watching the Egypt match, I thought they were beaten.
Yeah.
The idea that Argentina would come back was an incredible story. England have never been in that position. Their match against Mexico, which people consider one of the greatest matches ever, was actually showing the England fortitude and determination in probably the most difficult, hostile environment. And even against Norway, there were bad moments. Yeah. English defense, you could question about it. But in the end, they won the match.
Absolutely right. When it comes to the sort of history between the two countries, everybody kind of focuses on the Falklands, and that sort of underpins the political rivalry. Is it more than that? I mean, was there ever this, pre the Falklands, was there ever this, I mean, the Falklands have been there a long time, but pre the Falklands War, this kind of rivalry? Is there any other reason why a country in South America on the other side of the world would be rivals to us?
Well, I think with South America, we've always thought for a long time, this is a long time ago, we thought the South Americans played the magical football. We played the more rugged football,
Yep.
you know, big Englishmen handling the ball, handling the attacks and so on in defense. I don't mean handling, but you know what I mean, heading balls away and things like that and so on. And also, I think the problem here is that we like the Brazilians. We admire the Brazilians. You know, the world of Pelé and so on is a world that comes up.
Yeah.
With Argentina, we have some misgivings as to how they play football and how they approach the whole thing. With Brazilians, it's a beautiful game. You know, that is to an extent a factor that comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, what's fascinating, wonderful, sometimes infuriating about football is that, you know, every team, no matter how great and how incredible, has a bad day at the office. We literally saw this last night with France, of course. There was not really anybody that thought France were going to lose that match, and certainly not in the manner they did. They weren't there. I was literally off the ball. I think 2 chances on goal. I mean, it was a terrible, terrible night for France. You look on paper, this lineup of superstars, some of the obvious sort of Mbappé-esque candidates there, but they lost, and that can happen.
Absolutely. But to cheer everybody up, I backed England to beat Mexico, and I backed England to beat Norway, and I'm going to go to the bookies and back England to win. So, you know, I shall win some money, and England will be in the final for the first time since 1966. Take it any way you like, Ian, but I think that's a good omen.
Yeah, I think that's a good omen. And it does sort of sense, and it is a sort of a pivotal anniversary, isn't it, the 66 thing, to where we are today. And it does seem to me that, and I don't want to sound pessimistic here, just being in the final is massive, right? I mean, obviously, I hope we win it, but just being in the final is something that's not happened in our lifetimes.
Absolutely. And that will be a historic moment in itself. This is the country that invented football, gave it to the world. Not having been in the final since 1966 is a very painful, hurtful thing, you know. But English football has been growing up, and people like Harry Kane have gone through periods where they can believe they can win. That's very important. I think all this history business, you know, what happened in the Falklands and so on, is not something that will concern them. The only concern is, can we take the next step? I mean, that has a psychological impact as before the final whistle is blown. You know, we are going into the final. That is very important, and that psychological impact should not be underestimated.
There is also a sense, and I know Tuchel apparently was not that happy after last Saturday's result. He's the manager. He's not there to, you know, he's not their parents. He's not there to pat them on the head, give them a medal and say, well done, my boys. He's there as a manager. It's his job to literally conjure up all of the right manoeuvres, techniques, formations and plans for them to play. But he does seem to be, you know, he's a very different kind of manager, isn't he? There's something sort of more chess-like about this man.
Yes, indeed. And I must say, I watched that press conference, and I was amazed what he said, that, you know, England were lucky to win and so on. But I suspect there is some tactic behind it. You know, that is to get the players motivated. And remember, Alex Ferguson, one of our most successful club managers, also to an extent did that, to motivate the players. You don't always tell them you're the greatest. In the privacy of the dressing room, we don't know what he says. But out there in public, he wants to motivate them, wants to make them feel they have to do that bit more in order to win, in order to make sure that the opponent is defeated.
Indeed. Listen, Mahir, great to have you on with us. It's going to be an exciting night. Any specific prediction on the actual score? You said England to win. Any thoughts on by how many?
I would say 2-1.
2-1. Got it.
And Bellingham and Kane will share the goals.
Nice. That would be lovely. Mahir Bose, thank you, sir, for your time. Award-winning journalist and author. Loves his football, loves his politics as well. It is a big fixture. It is incredibly exciting. There's literally no reason why England can't win this. I think we are sort of slightly seduced by the word Argentina. You know, I'm a Chelsea fan, all right? We have I won't give any names away. Well, it doesn't matter really, does it? We have an Argentinian that many people never wanted in the side, including some of the team. But I was always seduced by, well, Chelsea have signed an Argentinian player. That's it, isn't it? An Argentinian player. And we did the same with Mexico. And when we played Mexico, before Mexico, it's like, wow, we got Mexico. Yeah, but look at, sorry, we've regularly beaten Mexico. We're a better team than Mexico. And we won them. We are slightly disturbed, scared by the sort of Central South American vibe. Brazil, Mexico, Argentina. And yet these guys can turn it in. There is very much a sort of footballing culture thing in those countries that perhaps exceeds even the frenzy of football in this country. It has just a different feel to it. A rawness, if you like. But no reason why not. No reason why not. I cannot wait. Let's talk to Lee in Norfolk. Back to respect in politics. Politicians in danger, the whole caboodle here. Lee, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Afternoon. This all stems from, you've got the left have infiltrated the school system, education.
Go on.
And it's, the left are quite nasty, really, because it's, you see the left, the people on the left, you see all this hatred towards everyone else. Everyone's far right, far right, far right. And kids pick up on that, and it's sort of actively passed on in schools.
Yep.
Because my daughter's a teacher in a secondary school in South East London. And I think it was a couple of months ago, they had the debate on the flags.
Oh, yeah.
And basically they were, the St. George, the flag of St. George and the Union Jack were basically bad. So they were told, these are bad flags, these are horrible flags, you don't want to, and certainly where my daughter is, most of the head of departments are, they have they're all for the trans ideology and it's everything else and
that's the trouble with kind of left-wing thinking. You have to sort of sign up to all these causes, whether you know anything about them, whether you really care about them, but you sign up to anything that you think makes you a nicer person. And the idea that you can challenge some views, such as the trans issue, for example, you might want to legitimately challenge it for lots of reasons. Doesn't make you a bigot, doesn't make you against anyone, frankly. It doesn't mean you're advocating hatred or anything like that. You might legitimately have a shed load of reasons why you want to challenge certain views. But that's enough to write you off as a piece of muck, right? That means you're not part of the nice gang, you're part of the problem.
Exactly, and this is what from the age of war, I'm assuming it happens to an extent in primary schools as well.
Yeah, possibly.
But certainly from the age of 11, they're going to the senior school, and the agenda. It's not dictated by the school. It's dictated by the government, and the agenda is right bad, left good.
Yeah.
So anyone who doesn't agree with anything left, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist.
Yeah, it's not good enough to say it's just a different view. It has to be written off, derided, attacked, and sold as dangerous, just because somebody thinks differently.
And all the respect and love and be kind is all.
That's completely out the window, doesn't it? Because it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply to people who are not on the left, which is curious and bonkers in equal measure. But those people are so ingrained in the idea that left is best and left is correct and morally superior that people on the right are essentially just muck. They're scumbags, Lee, I've got to move, but thank you for that. Some great points on education. One here says, please tell your guest that it's a fairy tale to think that a 60-year-old can live off an income of walking dogs. These politicians are seriously deluded. I think the guy we spoke to wasn't a politician, by the way. I think he was saying that you don't have to retire, or you don't have to fully retire. But you're right, if you stopped working but still couldn't get your pension, you could. It's really expensive to retire. So, believe me, I'm the bloke, because I'm of an age where you see those newspaper articles, and it's usually in the Telegraph or something, and it talks about how, you know, Bob decided to retire at 50. Here's how he did it. And then you read into it, and you just know there's going to be something in there that said, you know, he gave up his job in the city when he was 45. Stop there. Gave up his job in the city. Bob was a stockbroker. Bob had a couple of mil in the bank. That's why he no longer works. It's really hard, and life's really expensive. And I tell you what's interesting to do the equation. It's both interesting and terrifying. Your cost of living against your cost of lifestyle. That is the figure that will stop you sleeping at night. Because your cost of living, you can make that work. You can do your dog walks if it was just about paying your council tax, your mobile phone bill, your energy and your water. You could maybe make that work. So you might have to walk a lot of dogs. I don't know too much about that world. But then you factor it, then you get into your cost of lifestyle. So that includes your car. Now, there's a massive payment for a start. That includes going to the gym, going for a swim, going out for a drink, buying dog food. I can't remember what else is on the list. You start to make the list, and as the days go on, you think of more things that you have to add to it that you do and don't necessarily dwell on when you do it. The cost of your lifestyle is ludicrous. You can cut it back, but, you know, the last time I looked, most of us would like to have a bit of a lifestyle, no matter in what form it comes. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Comments from a fool, really. I mean, you don't have to be intelligent to be a politician, but it does help. You know, if he's going to talk about it, he needs to, if he's going to make historical references, he needs to read history correctly. Argentina weren't even a country as when we occupied the islands. They were called the Nation of States.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Always do it. 5 to 4. Let's go to Bob in Ludlow. How you doing, Bob?
Okay, mate. And you?
Yeah, good, thanks. What have you got for us?
Yeah, you were talking about the World Cup before.
Yes.
I'm not a big football fan these days, to be honest.
Okay.
But back in '66, my father had been posted to Germany, Gütersloh, and we were living in private RAF rented accommodation in a place called Westbexard. And the house that we lived in was owned by a German couple. They had the downstairs floor as their apartment, and we had the first floor. And during the World Cup in '66, they had a TV, and they invited us down to watch the TV, watch the match on the telly.
So to watch England, Germany, in a German family's house.
Yep. I was 9 at the time, and my brother was about 5 or 6. So there was me, my dad, my mum, and me and my brother sort of thing. And I think they had a 16-year-old daughter at the time called Ingeborg. I think she could have been 18, something like that. Anyway, but so there was the 3 of them and the 4 of us sort of thing. And obviously we were each all willing on our own side.
Was it good-natured?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Well, it was the 60s. You know, people were very polite about things. You know, there'd have been a scrap if that was today. So you remember, I mean, despite your young... I mean, you were 9, but regardless of how engaged you were in football, you were aware it was an event and it was big and it was something that needed to be watched.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, football back in them days wasn't to do with all the flaming money and everything.
No, of course.
What turned me off it years later sort of thing was all the money and everything that's involved. Yeah. It's not about the sport anymore. It's all about bloody money.
It really is, yeah. It's quite curious, isn't it, that the World Cup is the one area where actually they don't earn an awful lot of money for playing in the World Cup.
No, well, it's representing your country, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, no one's crying any tears for that because they earn all their money. I mean, I was looking at it last night. Every time you watch a football match, there are 22 multi-millionaires on that pitch, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's like when I was a soldier, I represented my country. I served my country, and the soldiers are the worst paid out of all public servants in the country.
Indeed.
You know.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it?
Because you want to represent your country.
What an amazing memory, though, the fact that you can recall that. And what makes it more poignant, Bob, is where you were when you saw it. I mean, watching it anywhere in Germany would have been good. Round some other family's home is even better.
Oh, it was brilliant, yeah. I mean...
That's superb. That's superb. Yeah. You said you don't follow it in the way perhaps you used to. Thoughts on tonight?
Well, I hope they win. I hope after 60 years that we do actually come back and win this one.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it? 60 years on. What a sort of a bit of an anniversary in that sense to it. Listen, Bob, great call. I love it. Thank you very much indeed for that. Bob in Ludlow, who remembers watching the '66 World Cup in Germany at a German family's house on their tea. You can only imagine back then, people were very polite. I bet there was no alcohol involved in watching it either. And Pete says, I retired out the army at 41 after 23 years in the army, went to Tenerife for 2 weeks, holiday, stayed for 10 years. Loving life, not there anymore, live somewhere hot, would never go back to the UK. Yeah, I think that's the deal, isn't it? Bit of sunshine somewhere. Kevin O'Sullivan is here. Kev.
All right, mate.
You'll be finished work when the match starts.
No, I get home after the show finishes at 7. I get home almost on the dot of 8, so I shall be chewing my nails throughout my commute tonight. Well, England expects and all that, so lots of World Cup. Also, this extraordinary story that John Simpson, the veteran Foreign Affairs editor, commentator at the BBC, says it's about a lot more than football. That if Argentina win, he says, make no mistake, their push to get the Malvinas back, as they put it, the Falkland Islands, will get very serious. If England win, it'll put the Argies back in their box.
Wow.
And they won't press for the islands. So a lot rests on tonight's game. One